Weather coming in across Scotland, though, because through the central belts, through the morning rush hour, it could be snowing quite heavily. That could cause some disruption. Certainly lots of snow continuing over the highlands of Scotland. Through the day, certainly at lower levels, it should start to turn back to rain. But as I said, the potential for disruption, especially in the morning. For much of Northern Ireland, England, Wales, it's a dry and sunny day, although some places will hang on to the fog until the afternoon. And it will be a cold day, obviously, and quite quickly through Friday night, the frost returns. Bear that in mind if you're heading out on Friday night. But we will see a little bit more in the way of wet weather across northern areas through Friday night and into Saturday. Snow at this stage will be mostly over the hills. We could see a bit over the Pennines, for example. At lower levels across northern England, it'll mostly be rain. The same goes for northern parts of Wales. But snow showers continuing over the highlands of Scotland. Many eastern and southern areas looking dry and fine on Saturday. And temperatures just starting to creep up. A dramatic change this weekend then as the cold air gets replaced by milder air sweeping in on Sunday. That is going to bring rain and wind, and for a time could bring some heavy snow too.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys on GB News. I've got loads for you today. Tens of thousands of nurses are now on strike, which means that tens of thousands of patients will suffer. The government has no plans to improve the pay offer given to them. The public are split over it. Politicians are split over it. We will speak to MPs, patients and people on those picket lines. Also, Harry and Meghan's latest round of Netflix documentaries have dropped. You may recognise my voice from one of the clips. I don't want the fame to go to my head or anything like that. I am available for bar mitzvahs and weddings. I feature in an episode, apparently episode 5. I wish they'd either stop using me for clout or at least pay me the royalties, lads. Come on. Anyway, after yesterday's tragic deaths in the Channel, the calls for us to sort out the small boat crisis are now growing louder than ever before. I've got MPs and experts on that. And in light of the Royal Mail strikes, a list of the very worst delivery companies has been published, along with some rather humorous incidents involving packages left on roofs, left in bins, etc. So get in touch with me today, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'll have a few of you live on the show on video as well. Should nurses have taken the, apparently anyway, 4.3% pay offer that was given to them? And do you think Harry and Meghan should pay me royalties? And have you had any nightmare package deliveries? gbviews@gbnews.uk. An eclectic mix today, ladies and gentlemen. But before that, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment will be disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, but Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the demand's unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Well, ICU nurse Kelly Hopkins says they're striking not just for pay, but for their patients.
Patients aren't safe, patients aren't getting the care. At the moment, there's 2 nurses on a ward that cannot deliver that care. We're going into hospital. I came into nursing to look after my patients, to hold their hands, to look after them, to wash them, to brush their teeth when they're unable to do that. And I can't do that at the moment because there's not enough staff on the ward.
Network Rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer their unions announced. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. Meanwhile, the RMT remains in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. Travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, told us now the TSSA's reached a settlement, it may well lead to the RMT offer being accepted.
Interestingly, Andrew Haynes, the chief executive of Network Rail, has been saying that the outliers in this dispute are now the RMT union, the main rail union, that it is a good offer relative to what everything else is happening in the country, and that people should accept it. It's not going to get any better. But meanwhile, of course, the dispute with the 14 train operators goes on, and anybody who's planning to catch a train later on this evening, well, do check in advance.
Meanwhile, ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have announced strikes over Christmas will be going ahead, causing yet more disruption for passengers during the festive period. More than 400 staff members at the West London Airport will begin a 72-hour walkout from tomorrow morning. It's after staff rejected the latest pay offer from their employer Menzies, having called for a 13% pay rise. A further 72-hour strike at Terminals 2, 3 and 4 will follow, running from the 29th of December to the morning of New Year's Day. Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 people have died, including 1 teenager, when a boat with 47 people on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. The leader of Kent County Council says 12 of those rescued were unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who are now in the care of authorities. British officials and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. The Bank of England has raised its base interest rate from 3% to 3.5%. It's the highest level in 14 years and the 9th consecutive hike. The Chancellor has said he acknowledges times are tough, but that the government's working with the Bank of England to reduce inflation. Meghan Markle has revealed how she thought about taking her own life in the final episodes of the docu-series released today on Netflix. Prince Harry, meanwhile, suggests the media were to blame for his wife's miscarriage and speaks about the breakdown of his relationship with his brother. He recalls it being terrifying to have Prince William shout at him and says his father says things he claims aren't true. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have declined to comment.
I would far rather get destroyed in the press than play along with this game or this business of trading. And to see my brother's office copy the very same thing that we promised the two of us would never ever do, that was heartbreaking.
And three-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker has been freed from jail today and will be deported from the UK. The 55-year-old German tennis star served just 8 months of the 2.5-year sentence for bankruptcy offences. He was convicted in April of hiding £2.5 million worth of assets and loans to avoid paying his debts. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Patrick. And Patrick, are you tempted to watch yet?
Well, I said I wouldn't entertain the idea of watching the Harry and Meghan documentary. Didn't want to give them the clicks, but now I'm in it. Of course, my ego is indeed that fragile that I will be glued to every single second. Moving on to a story that I think a lot of you would regard as being slightly more important than that. The biggest NHS nursing strike in the history of the profession is currently underway, with tens of thousands joining the picket lines outside hospitals in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. The chairman of Commons Health Committee, Conservative MP Steve Brine, has urged the NHS pay review body to have another look at their initial recommended pay rise for nurses. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay remains firm that although the government is hugely grateful to nurses, the 19% pay rise that the Royal College of Nursing is requesting is not reasonable in the current economic circumstances. There is political division over this, though. Some Tories breaking ranks. We'll talk about that a bit later on. Labour still sitting on the fence a little bit, so hard that they've got splinters, some would say. And the public are divided as well. But speaking earlier, here's what Steve Barclay had to say.
We have an independent process that looks at these issues in the round, that looks at the pressure for many viewers faced with higher taxes, faced with cost of living pressures, and balances those with the needs of our NHS as well. And that independent pay review looks at these issues, and we have accepted their recommendations in full. But we also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Yeah, well, over the course of this show, we're going to be going to picket lines. In fact, I'm doing that very, very shortly. We're also going to be speaking to political experts on this because, yet again, the NHS, of course, is used as a political football. But we're also going to be talking to people like you, the viewers, the listeners who've been getting in touch with us, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll be bringing in a couple of those live on a little bit later on in the show. But as we now do stare down the barrel of a nurses' strike, nurses picket lines left, right and centre, and, of course, patients now suffering as well with a lack of care. I read an article about a lady who doesn't think her feeding tube is going to be replaced. Where do you stand on this nurses' strike? Should they have taken what is believed, anyway, to be around a 4.3% pay offer? Had a couple of pay rises in the last couple of years, still well below inflation. It's a mixed bag at the minute. Anyway, GB News' London reporter Alice Porter has been outside St Thomas's Hospital in London today.
It's a very enthusiastic atmosphere here outside St Thomas's, with nurses who are all very much gathered here outside the hospital, and a number of people who've come also to show solidarity as well. We keep having buses and cars coming past, beeping to show their support for the nurses who are going on strike. And one of the nurses who joins me now is Dave Carr. Now, Dave, you're a critical care nurse.
Yep.
You normally would be working at the very hospital behind you. Why have you taken to the streets today to strike?
So this is about pay and it's about patient safety. So my salary, I've lost 20% of the value of my salary over the last 10 years. And It's about patient safety. What that means is, because the wages have been eroded so much in the NHS, we're now carrying 47,000 vacancies of nurses in England alone. Very simply, we need a pay rise to recruit and retain nurses. We need a pay rise to be able to offer the services that we can't currently.
Now, the ask of 19%, there will be some people listening to this and some people watching this who will say, well, I would love a pay rise of 19%. That's just not realistic when you're trying to negotiate with the government.
Well, I think the government have got to make us an offer. I mean, if you look at what's happened in Scotland, offers were made and offers were accepted, and they're being put to membership, and strikes have been called off. This government across the road just seem to be deaf to the tune that's being played out here. And these are the people that put their lives on the risk, their lives on the line during the COVID pandemic only a few years ago. I mean, I worked in critical care in both waves of the pandemic. And I just feel like the job that I do and the industry I work in is just disrespected by people that frankly are far richer than any of us on these picket lines and have no idea what it's like to be an ordinary citizen in this country.
As a critical care nurse, can you give perhaps a bit more information as to which procedures will have been cancelled today? Because of course there's been discussions as to urgent care still going ahead, but I mean, what does constitute urgent and something that's not non-urgent? I mean, I imagine that's quite difficult to work out in some cases.
So these decisions are made every day, so we don't have services, a lot of services run at the weekend. We need to rest and recuperate. We don't run all of these services on bank holidays and Christmas days. A lot of these services will be cancelled because they aren't life-threatening. But there's a lot of work going on in there now, including our critical care and our A&E departments that are working normally.
I mean, this is an extraordinary day, really, to have nurses striking for the first time in NHS history. I mean, at the moment it feels quite jubilant, I guess, the atmosphere here on the bridge, but I'm also getting a sense from a lot of the people who are here that they are desperate, and that is something that people have said to me when I've spoken, is they're absolutely exhausted.
Exhausted is a word for it. I mean, a third of nurses in critical care have been diagnosed with PTSD after the pandemic. We are exhausted, we're underpaid, we're undervalued, we're unable to do our job properly. Our ability to deliver core services in the NHS is compromised. There's 7 million people on waiting lists. We're not going to clear them unless we recruit and retain nurses into this industry, and that's on the government's hands. I mean, they've had the reins of power for a long time now, and what they've got is the first nurses strike in 109 years. It's on them.
How hopeful are you that this could resolve by next week? Because of course we've got yet another strike day next Tuesday. I mean, do you think there's any hope that this could resolve itself by then? I mean, obviously there's been progress in Scotland, but could we have things change any time before Tuesday?
I think if Rishi Sunak stops painting us as the enemy within and starts recognises us as the backbone of the country and makes a really decent offer to nurses. And this pay review stuff is nonsense. They tell the pay review body what the limits will be. Make us an offer, and I'm sure the RCM will get around the table and talk to him about it. But they've got to make us an offer, otherwise this is going to grow and grow and grow.
Well, Dave Carr, thank you very much for speaking to us there. I really appreciate it. Dave Carr is a critical care nurse here at St Thomas's Hospital, one of the many nurses who've come out today to strike over concerns about pay and patient safety. The question is, will it resolve by next Tuesday? We're expecting to have more strikes taking place.
Our London reporter just outside St Thomas's Hospital. Just in line to what she said there, I'm just reading a few facts and figures. Number 10 has no plans to rethink the pay offer. As we understand it, that was around a 4.3% pay offer. Strike action will cause, I'm quoting now, 70,000 appointments and surgeries to be lost. And a friend of mine tweeted something a little bit earlier on, which I think is interesting as well. When we're talking about pay, when we're talking about the amount of money the NHS is receiving, there is a job offer at the moment on the NHS website, Director for Lived Experience, and the salary is between 110,000 and 115,000 a year. If you're thinking of applying for that job, by the way, you would need to be an interpersonally talented individual, and it closes on the 8th of January, so still time to coin it in, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, as widespread strike action threatens to derail Christmas plans, the government is coming under even more pressure to act. Joining me now is GBNews political reporter Catherine Forster. Catherine, it's a very, very divisive issue, this, massively. The government saying, as it currently stands, they've got no plans to wiggle when it comes to the pay offer.
They're really holding very, very firm, aren't they? We've been hearing from the government it's a fair offer, it's a reasonable offer. They're saying we gave them 3% next year when we didn't give to any other public sector workers as a recognition for what they did in the pandemic. But the offer of 4.5% up to 9% for the people at the very bottom is obviously significantly below where inflation is now. So they are effectively asking these people to take a real terms pay cut. And I think the nurses do hold a different place in people's hearts to lots of other professions because it's not something they do regularly. Clearly, some of them are very upset to be doing this. They're quite apologetic, but they're saying they feel they have no choice. So although the government are holding firm, it's not a great look, is it, for them to point-blank refuse to talk about pay? And I do wonder, they're coming under pressure now from within their own party. I mean, former party chairman Jake Berry yesterday said it's not enough. Steve Brine, who's chair of the Health Select Committee, has said, let's ask the pay review body to go and have another look. Because, of course, the RCN have said if they will come to the table and talk about pay, they will call off the strikes. But at the moment, the government are still taking a very, very hard line.
Well, they are indeed, but it's interesting to see Labour's position on this as well, and that is relevant because if Labour do win the next general election, then they are going to be the ones responsible for this as the party in power. A lot of people on the picket lines there do want regime change, but what would that actually mean? And you look at the fact that Keir Starmer, as it currently stands, is sitting on the fence a little bit. I wonder whether or not they're walking a tightrope, Catherine, because they don't want to blame nurses. They could maybe be pointing a little bit more at the unions, but maybe they're getting that wrong sometimes.
I suspect they're quite glad that they're not in power at the moment with this wave of industrial unrest, because they are, as you say, treading a fine line. They're saying we support the right to strike, but they're not naming any numbers in terms of what they would do if they were in charge. And indeed, they've clearly said, Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, that 19% is not affordable, that if Labour were in power, they wouldn't be awarding 19% either. So it is tricky for them. But of course, they will capitalise all they can and say, this is all the government's fault.
They will indeed. Look, Catherine, thank you very, very much. I know you'll be keeping us bang up to date on all of this. One of the many strikes that you've got to be across throughout the course of this week and maybe the months ahead as well. Catherine Forster there, who is our political reporter. I just wanted to read a couple of the comments that are coming in thick and fast. And as I said as well, we will have members of the public, you, viewers, listeners, etc., actually live on air a little bit later on. But Annette's been on GBViews at GBnews.uk. And I think something where a lot of people are at here, Annette, public sector workers do work hard and provide a valuable service, but no more so than lots of other workers, etc., refuse collectors, farm workers, shop workers, Annette mentions there. She says the average nurse or paramedic, for example, is paid higher than the national average wage. And there's a lot of this going about, and I can't help but wonder whether or not there's this bizarre element of resentment that has built up over the course of the pandemic as well. And just in the aftermath of it, there was a lot of sentiment from a lot of people that they still, once the initial COVID wave have worn off, maybe they couldn't quite get the medical attention they were hoping for, maybe there was a delay, and maybe that's reducing the sympathy for some of the nurses there, but maybe realistically we're better directing some frustration, if indeed there is frustration, towards the unions more than the nurses themselves. Perhaps I've fallen foul of that in the past. I'll hold my hands up to that. It is a very emotional topic, isn't it? Healthcare in this country, and not everybody's family has always necessarily received the best healthcare. I've been clouded by that in my time as well. But do you think that maybe the nursing union could have done a little bit more to negotiate? Should the government have been doing a bit more to negotiate? It appears that the impasse was hit at around the 4.3% pay offer from the government, the nurses coming in with 19% or so, and there not being much attempt to meet anywhere in the middle of that. Some 70,000 appointments and surgeries, etc., will be cancelled today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Keep your views coming in on that. But from one strike to another, because members of the TSSA union working at Network Rail voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer. And this, by the way, ladies and gents, is actually fascinating because now there's a little bit of union-on-union beef going on, with one union accusing another union of essentially being scabs and breaking their picket line. But in a ballot, 85% of the TSSA members backed a deal, so said they didn't want to strike. The union's organising director said it showed what can be done through negotiations when there's a serious offer on the table. The accepted deal includes, get this, no compulsory redundancy agreement until January the 31st, 2025, so job security, and a minimum pay rise of at least £1,750 or 5% backdated to the start of the year. So those are the facts and figures on it. But joining me now is former Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, Norman Baker, Sorry, Secretary of State, I believe. Norman, I've just demoted you. Apologies. Yeah, you don't go. Go on.
Former Shadow Secretary of State, but actually a Rail Minister as well during the coalition government in 2010.
There you go. Well, don't go on strike, please, for me mispronouncing your job title there, or former job title. But when it comes to this now, do you think there is a little bit of union-on-union beef? Because it does appear to show maybe that the RMT is a bit more militant.
I think what we got are different situations arising. The TSSA are predominantly white-collar employees, and they were probably in the firing line for job losses as a first option. So therefore, they've secured a deal, which means no redundancy. And to them, that will be more important, I suspect, than the pay increase. The guys on the line, tapping wheel tappers and stuff, they're going to be in a different situation altogether. So we've got a range of different unions, including also Unite and ASLEF. We've got a range of different employers, including the operators and open access operators, freight companies, and everybody else. And they've all got different objectives. So I don't think you can read too much across from one to the other, Patrick, is a short answer.
Yeah, but I think it does isolate the RMT a little bit, and I think it plays into the government's hands, doesn't it? Which shows that the government, if I was the government, I'd be spinning this as, hey, look, we're not unreasonable, we've come with an offer, and actually it's only the unreasonable people who are rejecting it. They're costing you Christmas with your family, they're putting you out of business, etc. Yeah. And this really does, I wonder, weaken the RMT's position.
Well, it doesn't help the RMT's position that a union settled. But, I mean, you say the government. Of course, what's happening is that the unions will say that they're officially in discussions with the employers, who are the operators, or Network Rail. And the government the government itself says it's got no role in this. But, of course, we know the government's pulling the strings. And what we get to see, I don't want to be downbeat at this time of year, but what we get to see are the negotiations with ASLEF. And ASLEF are capable of bringing the entire network to a standstill, which the RMT aren't.
Well, just talk to me very quickly about why ASLEF are more capable than the RMT of bringing the whole place to a standstill.
Because the management can replace RMT, they can be conductors on trains, they can wave trains off on platforms, they're skilled to do that. ASLEF are the train drivers, and no one can replace the train drivers. If the train drivers stop, the trains all stop.
And that maybe is a little bit why train drivers are massively better paid, I suppose you could say, than certainly, cleaners, etc. Yes, I get that there's a more skill element to the job. I'm not doing a disservice to cleaners, but go on.
I'm going to say they can't be replaced, and the time to train a train driver is quite long. They've got a unique position, and they basically can demand what they want, and people have to cave into it. Otherwise, there's no trains running. Whereas the RMT can be effectively undermined, if you like, by management taking their roles.
Yeah, can I just quickly get you on the idea now? A lot of people email in on this to me, and a lot of people question whether or not we are now, as a taxpayer, paying for people to have jobs that should no longer really exist. And when I read out phrases like no compulsory redundancy agreed until January 31st, 2025, in any other line of work other than the public sector, in this particular element of the public sector, people don't really get that offer, do they?
No, but Patrick, what's also true, and Network Rail have said this, is that there's been a huge number of people who are prepared to take voluntary redundancy, and therefore compulsory redundancy is not necessary. So there will be a reduction in the workforce. It will just be voluntary. But, the deal to be struck, and I've made this plain to people time and again, the deal to be struck is that you get rid of the antediluvian terms and conditions that shouldn't be there, the no Sunday work, all sort of stuff, and in return you give them a decent pay rise. That's the deal.
All right, Norman, look, thank you very, very much. That was, of course, Norman Baker there. I'm just going to call him Transport Guru and former politician because there was rather a long job title there. Well, joining me very, very shortly is Liam Halligan, because we're going to be talking about the Bank of England. It's raised its base interest rate by 0.5 percentage points to 3.5%. That's the highest level in 14 years. What does that mean for the money in your pocket? We'll discuss all of that. Also, as well, you may remember this voice, won't you, from the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. I didn't care about it at all. I said I wasn't going to watch a minute of it. But realistically, my ego is now so fragile that now I've found out I'm actually in it. I will, of course, be hanging on every single word that Whinge and Ginge have to offer. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Right, now we all care about the money in our pockets, don't we? And the Bank of England has raised the base rate of interest earlier by 0.5%, bringing it to a 14-year high and now standing at 3.5%. The signals this could continue to increase further in the coming months. Well, I'm joined by our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, who's with me right here in the studio with On the Money. Liam here yet again to tell me how poor I am.
I don't mean it, Patrick. Actually, we expected a bigger interest rate rise today from the Bank of England. It was clear interest rates were going to go up, but instead of by 0.75%, they actually went up by 0.5%. I've got a graph here that viewers can look at, and we'll keep GB News Radio listeners abreast too. So you can see there, Patrick, that those step-up increases throughout 2022. This is the 9th time interest rates have gone up. At the start of the year, they were 0.25%. Now they're 3.5%, up by 0.5% today. This is the base rate. This is the Bank of England's interest rate when it lends to commercial banks. It's by definition the minimum lending rate in the economy. All other interest rates for mortgages, loans, all the rest of it, car finance, they're benchmark off that rate. And what does that 0.5% increase in the interest rate mean for your mortgage? I've got a graphic here. If every £100,000 of mortgage debt that you have on the average deal, of course deals differ, it's 25 quid a month more with this 0.5% rate increase in interest rates. That's an extra £300 a year to service your mortgage debt. Look, a lot of people listening and watching will be moving off fixed rate mortgage deals and then going on to rate mortgage deals. They'll have fixed when interest rates were ultra low. They're in for paying much, much higher mortgage rates. If you're on a variable rate mortgage deal, though, it's only a slight increase today, and it could have been much more.
OK, all right, so it's not all massive doom and gloom. Are we expecting things to get a bit worse before they get better?
Well, I'm increasingly coming to the view, I must say, that inflation now has peaked. Inflation was 10.7% in the year to November, up from down from 11.1% in the year to October. And there are signs now in the supply chain that the logistical problems post-lockdown are easing a little bit. Business surveys are showing that. Plus, the pound's getting stronger. That makes our imports cheaper. There are lots of good reasons, Patrick, kind of being stored up, why the increases in the cost of living that we've seen over the last year, really eye-watering increases, the highs of 40%, are now going to become less. So it's not as if prices are going to come down, but the rate of increase of prices is likely to ease. And all other things being equal, that means the Bank of England is less likely to keep hammering us with increased interest rates.
So, actually, looking at it like that, is the leverage of some of these striking workers being diminished now? Because if the cost of living crisis gets better, then presumably...
Potentially. We should say that for a lot of people listening, those people who have savings, pensioners who live off what we call fixed income, premium bonds and so on, the fact that interest rates are going up is a good thing. Savings have indeed been hammered for many years because interest rates have been so low. But you're right, this does start to change the complexion. For instance, let's take this train strike. And we've been reporting, in fact, we reported a leak of it yesterday, that the TSSA union has accepted that pay deal. A lot of Unite Rail workers have accepted their pay deal. Now it's the RMT, always the more militant of the rail unions, that are not. That pay deal gives them, I think it's 5% this year, 5% next year. It may be, Patrick, if inflation's come down a lot next year, that 5% is actually a real terms wage increase. It might be more than inflation. Right? So these are the kind of negotiations, this is the backdrop to these ongoing industrial talks. Look, there are still going to be a lot more strikes in the run-up to Christmas. I'm not saying the sun has just come out and thawed away all the economic bad news. What I am saying is that this rise in interest rates today could have been a lot worse.
Brilliant stuff. And Liam, thank you very much for coming on and not being too starstruck. I know you're now dealing with someone who's in the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. I don't like to go on about it.
I'll get your autograph after the show.
That's fine, mate. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm available for bar mitzvahs and weddings. There we go. All right, well, look, thank you very much, everybody. On with me, Patrick Christys. Cheers, Liam. Coming up, yes, here we go. It's the Royal Rumble Mark II. Netflix has released the final 3 episodes of the Harry and Meghan docu-series. The couple are claiming they are better at the job of being royals than Charles, Kate and William. That's a pretty bold claim. Also, Harry's saying that he was living in fear of his brother shouting at him for a man who was in the army and in Afghanistan a couple of times. I find that hard to believe. Do you agree with them? We will speak to our very own Cameron Walker next, who we have chained to a cinema seat somewhere around the London area and made him watch all of this stuff. I'll be back after the latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses across parts of the UK are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment is disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise, but Health Secretary Steve Barclay says this demand is unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Network Rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer their unions announced. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. Meanwhile, the RMT remains in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. That as ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have suspended planned strike action. That's after receiving an improved pay offer. More than 400 staff members had been set to begin a 72-hour walkout from tomorrow morning. The Unite Union says it'll now ballot its members, and other planned industrial action remains in place pending the outcome. And a teenager was among the 4 people who died in the English Channel on Wednesday. According to the leader of Kent County Council, at least a dozen unaccompanied asylum seeker children were on board the small boat when it capsized. It's understood they're now in the care of authorities. The search, meanwhile, continues for the 4 migrants believed to be missing still. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick's back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wow, look at that graphic. OK, right, so the Sussex saga of drama continues as Meghan and Harry released the last 3 episodes of their Netflix documentary this morning. This time, they did make it very personal. I woke up to a couple of messages on my phone from friends to say, oh, my gosh, you're in the Harry and Meghan documentary, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, got me out of bed rather quickly because I was in damage limitation mode. But yes, they just used a couple of audio clips of me. I said I didn't care about it. I said I wasn't going to watch it. But, of course, my ego is now so fragile that I will be hanging on every single word that they've made. I believe that a little bit later on we'll be able to play you the clip where I make a cameo appearance. I'm yet to hear from the Sussexes in terms of royalties. I imagine the cheques in the post. I do want to hear from you all at home, though. GBViews, gbnews.uk. Let's get a petition going to get Harry and Meghan to pay me what I'm worth. OK, so 10p, basically. But anyway, Harry has made some quite shocking claims about Prince William, screaming and shouting at him while they were talking about him moving abroad and leaving the royal family. He's also said that the Mail on Sunday were to blame for Meghan's miscarriage, which is strong stuff. Very, very strong stuff. Plus, Meghan discusses her first engagement with the Queen, which I believe we have a clip of. Apparently not. Well, there we go. Let's go live now to our Royal Reaction Room, where GB News' royal reporter has been watching the docu-series for us. Cameron, contain yourself. I know I am now an international star. But yes, there's some strong allegations here, namely that Prince Harry, a man who has done 2 tours of Afghanistan and been in the military, was terrified of his brother shouting at him.
Yeah, incredibly strong allegations, Patrick. I think it's fair to say these final 3 episodes of this Netflix docudrama that has played out on Netflix between Harry and Meghan, a lot more explosive, the 3 episodes we have seen today. I think the first thing to point out, Patrick, the clip you're going to show there showed Meghan describing her experience of being with the late Queen in Cheshire for an engagement, and was really actually speaking about her warmth and affection for Her Majesty the Queen. Throughout this documentary series, despite all the criticisms and the turmoil that's gone on, one thing has remained constant, and that is that Harry and Meghan do not criticise either Prince Philip or Queen Elizabeth II, and in fact, quite the opposite. They're very much singing their praises, as it were. Well, I'm joined by former royal correspondent Nicholas Owen to bring us more detail on this. Nick, thanks for joining me in GB News' Royal Reaction Room. This is a fair point, isn't it? It's that there is no criticism whatsoever of the late Queen or Prince Philip.
Almost none at all. There's one, I suppose, very slight one where he says that there was this, we'll come on to talk about it maybe, the big blow-up at Sandringham, the summit, if you like, there. And he has William in one corner screaming, the Prince of Wales, as he then was now, the King, saying things that Harry didn't agree with, let's put it that way. But he also said there was the Queen saying nothing. But I suppose that's pretty minor. You're right. Very clear that Harry's regard for his grandmother and his grandfather, it does shine through this. Let's give them that. Let's give them that.
Indeed. Harry goes on to talk about his experience negotiating his way out of the royal family as a working member, moving to California with his wife Meghan, and he does speak in quite frank terms, as you were talking about there, Nick, at that Sandringham summit between his experience with his brother and his father Charles and the Queen. So let's just have a look at that clip.
I chose option 3 in the meeting, half in, half out. Have our own jobs, but also work in support of the Queen. But it became very clear very quickly that that goal was not up for discussion or debate. It was terrifying to have my brother scream and shout at me, and my father say things that just simply weren't true, and my grandmother, quietly sit there and sort of take it all in.
Prince Harry talking there about his experience of the so-called Sandringham summit. Nick, pretty strong words there from him.
Yes, indeed. Hide behind the sofa stuff, some of it. A family tearing itself apart is what it seems, isn't it?
It certainly is, but it's showing the breakdown, I suppose, of Prince William and...
Well, that was Cameron Walker there in our Royal Reaction Room. Views flowing in the inbox, as one would imagine, to the fact that Harry and Meghan decided to unload yet again in another Netflix documentary. We've got loads to come today on this particular show, and I just want to delve into the inbox at the moment. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Lisa has been on. Now, Lisa says, Patrick, you never read out my comments, so here's one last attempt. Well, Lisa, ask and you shall receive. Sometimes you just have to bang on the door a little bit. Starting with this in relation to nurses' strike, which is our other big issue of the day. OK, the nurses are now on strike. Tens of thousands of nurses on strike. Some, according to reports, 70,000 operations and surgeries cancelled, appointments cancelled, which is a huge number for people. People not receiving basic treatment. One lady talking about how she won't have a feeding tube replaced, which I think is pretty serious, let's be perfectly honest with you. But Lisa says, a starting wage for a nurse is £27,000. This is more than my husband, a skilled engineer, gets. It's more than I get in retail. 19% is ludicrously greedy. My husband and I worked throughout COVID. He hasn't had a pay rise for 3 years. We get no benefits at all. We don't use food banks, though. This is Lisa's view. She says they need to learn to shop and cook economically and be realistic. And Lisa, that is not an uncommon view. I think what is uncommon is that a lot of people don't necessarily have the guts to actually say that kind of stuff out loud. I can't help but wonder, though, Lisa, whether or not Rishi Sunak missed a trick, because I fell into this trap a little bit earlier on. I'll hold my hands up to it, about blaming or appearing to blame nurses as opposed to maybe more union rabble-rouser type things. And just on that, again, I want to emphasise, as indeed nurses take to picket lines right across the country at the moment, it is an incredibly difficult job, a job that I would be probably unable to do, and certainly one that I wouldn't want to do. I get completely that there are massive, massive issues when it comes to the length of hours working and recruitment and retention of staff. And it is the first strike, apparently, in 109 years. And there has been some Tories breaking the picket lines, if you want to say that. Jake Berry, the former Conservative Party chairman, he's saying that nurses deserve a much higher pay rise. We've had Steve Bryan as well. He's piped up. He's saying they deserve a higher pay rise. But I want to know what you guys think, really, because I think that one thing that Rishi Sunak maybe got a little bit wrong was to say that to focus on the nurses and not the unions. I will always have a problem with the idea of anyone who is in the public sector, anyone who provides a life-saving service, walking out on their patients. I will always just morally have a problem with that. But I know it splits a lot of people. I know a lot of you think, well, they don't have any particular choice. But then I look at job titles like this one here. Director for Lived Experience, yeah? A Director for Lived Experience. I once had a local council where I worked. I used to have to go and report on their meetings there. And they had a Director of People and Places. But anyway, Director for Lived Experience, £110,000 a year, that is. And you do wonder whether or not the anger should be directed towards the government or whether or not it should be directed towards management for misspending money. But some breaking news now for you, ladies and gentlemen. Some breaking news, very much a tone shift here. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull on Sunday have been named by West Midlands Police as brothers Samuel Butler, aged 6, and Finlay Butler, aged 8. Their cousin, Thomas Stewart, 11, and Jack Johnson, 10. I'm just going to read those names and indeed their relations to each other, which I think adds another layer of tragedy to this, doesn't it, when you read this? So West Midlands Police have confirmed that brothers Samuel Butler, aged 6, and Finlay Butler, aged 8, their cousin, Thomas Stewart, 11, and Jack Johnson, 10, all sadly died in that Solihull Lake incident. We will get more shortly from our reporter, Jack Carson, who will be at the scene for us there. Yes, yet another layer to that tragedy. OK, well, look, we return to the rise in the base interest rates. The Bank of England increased it by 0.5% to 3.5%. And while it's impacting businesses across the country, it could impact some areas worse than others. And businesses in Northern Ireland are particularly vulnerable, apparently, to this rate increase because, classic, the Northern Ireland Protocol has increased checks and paperwork for imports, which has caused businesses to order in bulk, adding to their borrowing costs. And I believe that our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, is at a generator factory now for us. Doogie, thank you very much. I can see you've got a particular chap with you there. Talk me through it, Doogie. What's going on?
Well, hello and welcome to Craigavon. I'm at AJ Power. It is a very substantial generator manufacturing company. 80% of these generators are made in Britain. And joining me now is the MD of this company, Ashley Piggott. Ashley, what does this 0.5% in interest rate rise mean to manufacturing?
It was expected, of that there's no doubt, and we had planned in from quite a long time ago the rise in interest rates. But I think the issue is really the speed and frequency of the increases and where they eventually end up at. And we don't have a problem with the rate. It has to be there and it has to be fair to all people, but it's the speed and the number of increases we've had.
The Northern Ireland Protocol, of course, is causing problems, but you do put out to about 90 countries across the world and 5 continents. What does interest rates and the protocol mean to you there?
Well, the protocol uses a lot of our working capital. We're having to bring in large bulk loads instead of bringing in frequent supplies because of the administration costs, and so it's eating quite a lot of capital there. Our overseas distributors in some countries are seeing very, very high interest rates. Ghana, for example, is 24.5%, and we have to help and support those distributors of our products throughout the world.
And your own staff here, you employ quite a lot of people. Are they asking for pay rises, or what way will that affect them, especially with the cost of living involved?
It will affect them, but we continuously look at their pay on a competitive basis. They're in the top quartile in Northern Ireland manufacturing, and it hurts. It's hurting everybody, and we just have to accept that inflation will be higher than what we can expect in our pay packets.
Where exactly do all these components come from?
80% of our components are manufactured in the United Kingdom. We're very proud of that. They are manufactured in Peterborough, in Rutland, in Stafford. Those would be the main ones, and our spend is an eight-figure spend in the UK. So our products are 80% content from the United Kingdom, and we're very proud of that.
The likes of British Steel, of course, has a 25% tariff put upon it. Is that going to affect you in the long term?
It is. It's 25% on certain types of steel. We have an investment plan, which was planned from 2017, to build a new factory and to start with more sheet metal processing. And we're very concerned on steel, and also with the news that the EU, which we are now in inverted commas part of, likely to impose a carbon tax on British Steel in Q4 next year.
Well, I mean, all of that plays right into the economy of Northern Ireland and where everything's going. But of course, you're dealing in lots of different currencies. The euro seems to have gone up because of this only 0.5% interest rate, and it seems to have come down against the dollar. It's still very volatile. Those rates are going all over the place. What does it mean to a company like you that exports?
We live and die on currency. The long-term rate in the euro has just moved down to 13.95. The spot rate is, I think, 115.20. We are always in the situation of having to make sure that we're covering our sales in whether it be Swedish crowns, euros, dollars, South African rand. Constantly we're working at this.
OK, that's all from us here in Craigavon. This is a top-level company, former holder of the Queen's Award for Export. They do know what they're talking about.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you to the company there for allowing us in, really, to see it from the coalface, as it were, the very real human and indeed business cost of what's been going on at the moment. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK, so just to finish this out, where I thought it's all been very, very, very doom and gloom, hasn't it, in the last few days? That's the news agenda, thus is life, and we do have to go with it. But there was something that I think might provide a little bit of light relief, although not for the people affected by terrible parcel deliveries. But the consumer group Which has revealed the best and crucially worst delivery companies amidst the ongoing postal strikes that are taking place. And with it, some utter horror stories, which I must admit, sorry everyone involved, but I do find absolutely hilarious, about the ways in which your parcels were, or crucially, were not delivered. And if you have had any delivery disasters, I want to hear from them. gbviews@gbnews.uk. There's a cracker in here, which I'm going to read out very shortly. But the survey reveals that 2 in 5 of all respondents encountered problems with their Christmas deliveries last year. Now, DHL has ranked the least reliable delivery firm. Don't worry, we've gone to comment from DHL, although it got lost in the post. No, it didn't. They got it to us. Other complaints include 14% of people saying their parcel was late, 11% had parcels left outside of their house without permission, while 8% did not get their delivery at all. Here are some corkers for you. One respondent said that a pair of slippers were thrown over the fence and landed in a neighbour's pond. So there you are, delivery service at its absolute finest. I have another one here, which is that someone... I would, by the way, question the sanity of anyone who decides that they want to have a tarantula as a pet. My arachnophobia is extreme, and I think... I'm sorry about this, but I think you're weird. OK, so a delivery of pet tarantulas delayed overnight in transit. Obviously, that's not a particularly great one as well. A couple of people have emailed in, and Jerry is one of them. He didn't name the delivery company, and that's important because we haven't got time to go to a writer reply for absolutely every single one of them. But the kind of incarnation of the Ring doorbell is now providing a little bit of fodder for people who are getting bad deliveries, right? Because I don't know anyone who's got a Ring doorbell, you ring it or whatever, and it records everything that goes on. outside. Some of them as well are motion censored, so whether or not you actually intend to knock on someone's door, it can record everything that you're saying and doing, with disastrous effect, as was found by Paul in Stevenage, who got in touch with me to say that the particular chap delivered his parcel, knocked on the door, they weren't in, he left them a note and then proceeded to urinate in a bush next to his front door, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Get your delivery nightmares in. Julie has been on, thank you very much, Julie, to say that she asked for an AM delivery from DHL. We're going to go to a statement from DHL very shortly. He said that, yes, it was a classic one. They said they delivered it to their house, but when they sent them a picture of it, it wasn't their house. Anyway, a statement from DHL, Peter Fuller, said, we regularly speak to customers to find out how we can do better, including running monthly, fully independent surveys. Is that it? Is that the length of his stay? Well, that will come as a great comfort to Julie, who had a package delivered to the complete wrong house. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Lots more to come in the next hour. More from the picket line as nurses walk out in a dispute over pay. They also say it's to do with conditions as well. Of course, we want to hear from you, the GB News viewers. Do you support the strikes? And we'll also bring you more, sadly, from the Solihull Lake incident. Police have named the 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in bad weather. All of that and more coming your way. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Keep them coming, people. Now to your weather.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Milder weather is on the way this weekend, but for the time being, it is still cold out there. And on Friday, tomorrow, we could see some heavy snow across some parts of Scotland. We do have Met Office warnings in place. Low pressure to the south, northerly winds, but this little area of low pressure doesn't look much, but it could start to change things over the next 24 hours. For the time being, we've still got snow showers coming in across northern Scotland, a few across eastern England as well, which may well allow things to be quite icy during this evening. And then we start to see that weather front coming into western Scotland. Rain on the coast, but inland it will be snow falling, and it could be quite heavy snow through the night, and especially during Friday. For most of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, it's dry, it's clear. There will be some freezing fog around, and it will be a very cold start to Friday. We need to keep our eyes on this wintry weather coming in across Scotland, though, because through the central belts, through the morning rush hour, it could be snowing quite heavily. That could cause some disruption. Certainly lots of snow continuing over the highlands of Scotland. Through the day, certainly at lower levels, it should start to turn back to rain. But as I said, the potential for disruption, especially in the morning. For much of Northern Ireland, England, Wales, it's a dry and sunny day, although some places will hang on to the fog until the afternoon. And it will be a cold day, obviously, and quite quickly through Friday night, the frost returns. Bear that in mind if you're heading out on Friday night. But we will see a little bit more in the way of wet weather across northern areas through Friday night and into Saturday. Snow at this stage will be mostly over the hills. We could see a bit over the Pennines, for example. At lower levels across northern England, it'll mostly be rain. The same goes for northern parts of Wales. But snow showers continuing over the highlands of Scotland. Many eastern and southern areas looking dry and fine on Saturday. And temperatures just starting to creep up. A dramatic change this weekend then as the cold air gets replaced by milder air sweeping in on Sunday. That is going to bring rain and wind, and for a time could bring some heavy snow too.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hey, welcome back everybody. It's just gone 4 o'clock. You are locked into me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, a jam-packed hour coming your way. Downing Street has said they have no plans whatsoever to look again at the pay deal for nurses who are staging their biggest ever strike in the history of the NHS. We'll speak to MPs, we'll speak to patients, we'll speak to people on picket lines, and indeed a few of you as well. That's all in a few minutes. And it's dropped, the highly anticipated final part of Harry and Meghan's docu-series on Netflix. Yes, OK, you may recognise these dulcet tones from one of the clips. I'll bring you my 5 seconds of royal fame in the next half hour. I can only assume that my royalties are in the post, although apparently they sent them with Royal Mail, so they'll never get it. But anyway, we also, very much shifting tone this people, get the latest from Solihull after police name the 4 children who sadly died after falling into a frozen lake. Desperately, desperately awful story, that. GB Views at gbnews.uk. On some of the other topics that we've got, should nurses have taken what is believed to be around a 4.3% pay offer? And do you think Meghan and Harry should send me royalties? Oh, also, keep these parcel disasters coming in as well. Some fantastic ones here about people with their nightmare deliveries. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Keep all those coming, people. But now it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 4. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull on Sunday have been named by West Midlands Police. 8-year-old Finlay Butler, his 6-year-old brother Samuel and their cousin, 11-year-old Thomas Stewart, were taken to hospital where they died on Monday. The families say they are devastated by the loss of the boys in such tragic circumstances. The 4th child, who reportedly tried to save the others, has been named as Jack Johnson, aged 10. Tens of thousands of nurses are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour strikes over pay. Staff will continue to provide some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment are disrupted. Members of the Royal College of Nursing are asking for a 19% pay rise. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the demand's unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
ICU nurse Kelly Hopkins says they're striking not just for pay, but for their patients.
Patients aren't safe, patients aren't getting the care. At the moment, there's 2 nurses on a ward that cannot deliver that care. We're going into hospital. I came into nursing to look after my patients, to hold their hands, to look after them, to wash them, to brush their teeth when they're unable to do that. And I can't do that at the moment because there's not enough staff on the ward.
Network Rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer their union has announced. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. Meanwhile, the RMT remains in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. Travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, told us now the TSSA's reached a settlement, it may well lead to the RMT offer being accepted.
Interestingly, Andrew Haynes, the chief executive of Network Rail, has been saying that the outliers in this dispute are now the RMT union, the main rail union, that it is a good offer relative to what everything else is happening in the country, and that people should accept it. It's not going to get any better. But meanwhile, of course, the dispute with the 14 train operators goes on, and anybody who's planning to catch a train later on this evening, well, do check in advance.
Well, ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have suspended planned strike action after receiving an improved pay offer. More than 400 staff members had been set to begin a 72-hour walkout tomorrow morning. The Unite union says it will now ballot its members, and other planned industrial action remains in place pending the outcome. Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 people have died, including 1 teenager, when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. The leader of Kent County Council said 12 of those rescued were unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who are now in the care of authorities. British officials and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. The Bank of England has raised its base rate from 3% to 3.5%. It's the highest level in 14 years and the 9th consecutive hike. The Chancellor says he acknowledges times are tough, but that the government's working with the Bank of England to reduce inflation. Meghan Markle has revealed how she thought about taking her own life in the final episodes of a docuseries released today on Netflix. Prince Harry, meanwhile, suggests the media were to blame for his wife's miscarriage and speaks about the breakdown of his relationship with his brother. He recalls it being terrifying to have Prince William shout at him and his father say things he claims that weren't true. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have declined to comment.
I would far rather get destroyed in the press than play along with this game or this business of trading. And to see my brother's office copy the very same thing that we promised the 2 of us would never ever do, that was heartbreaking.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Now, there is that breaking news, tragic breaking news. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull on Sunday have been named by West Midlands Police this afternoon. I'm going to cross over live now to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who is at the scene of this awful, awful incident. Jack, what is the latest, please?
Well, hello, Pat. The West Midlands Police a short time ago released that statement, as you mentioned, that brothers Finlay and Samuel Butler and their cousin Thomas Stewart were pulled from the freezing cold water and rushed to hospital, where 8-year-old Finlay and 11-year-old Thomas died a short time later. Of course, we already know about 10-year-old Jack Johnson, who tragically died on Sunday alongside them as well. Of course, he wasn't related to them or a friend with them, and he just rushed in when he saw they were in trouble and tried to save them, and he ended up losing his life as well. Of course, yesterday we heard the tragic news that we'd lost the 6-year-old involved in this incident. That of course was Samuel Butler, the brothers. So really, really devastating circumstances here, that one family has lost brothers and of course their cousin alongside them as well. We've also had words from the parents. Their parents said that as a family we are devastated at the loss of our beautiful boys Tom, Finn and Sam in such tragic circumstances. We would like to thank the emergency services for all they did in rescuing the boys and the community for their support. It's been overwhelming. We'd like to pass our condolences on to Jack's family at this very sad time. Thomas's brother also paid tribute to him and his cousin ahead of the sad news that Sam had died. He wrote that Thomas was such a lively little soul. He had a big heart for such a young kid and he was so beautiful. He loved being outside, playing with his mates. I love you, Tom, big bro. We'll take care of the family and I will see you soon. And this is so devastating for this community. Of course, those 3 boys that we knew that we'd lost earlier in the week, it's almost like this community feels like it's having to go through the same grieving process again as we learn of the passing of that 6-year-old boy as well. Throughout the week, messages of support for 6-year-old Samuel were coming through, saying things like keep fighting, carry on. Unfortunately, we learnt yesterday that fight just could not be won. There's so many people that have come here to pay tributes, people from all over the county, not just from this area. We've had people from Stafford today, people travelling from Coventry, people that have just got children and really feel somehow connected and so close to this tragic incident, because many people here have said we used to play on lakes as a kid, we used to do exactly the same thing, and this is what makes this incident so tragic as well. The police operation here has now ceased, that's now concluded. Of course, we knew that there are underwater operations, diving operations going on, because there were differing witness statements that the West Midlands Police weren't sure whether were correct or not, so they were doing underwater diving to make sure that that reported 6 children involved wasn't the case. Now that we know of the passing of the 4th child, we now know that those police operations have now concluded. The lake has been back open to the public today, and many members of the public who have laid tributes have gone down to the lake to have their own moment of solemn reflection.
Jack, thank you very much for bringing us the latest on that. Jack Carson there. Yes, as I said earlier, another layer to that tragedy when you look at the relations between the lads involved. There, our hearts go out to them and their families, of course. But we're moving away from that story now and coming back to another one of our top stories that we're going to be running throughout the course of this show today, with people on the picket lines, with MPs, with members of the public and, of course, political gurus as well, because the nurses have walked off the job today in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, staging their biggest ever strike in the history of the NHS. In Scotland, members of the GMB union have become the first to reject a new pay deal offered by the Scottish Government for NHS staff. But Downing Street says there are no plans to look again at the pay deal for nurses, as the Royal College of Nursing continues its campaign for a 19% increase to salaries. There are lots of different layers to this, right? Because they were given a pay rise this year, one last year, offered apparently a 4.3% pay rise. Of course, inflation has frankly changed the game when it comes to their demands. There is a massive problem with recruitment and retention. And as we hear about strikes, left, right and centre at the moment, I would argue that the nurses one and potentially the ambulance workers strike that is just around the corner as well are probably the most emotive and certainly garner the strongest sense of feeling one way or the other on this. So keep your views coming in on it, because we do want to hear from you. But joining me in the studio right now is GBNews' political reporter, Catherine Forster. And you cannot disassociate the NHS from politics, can you? So what is the political latest on this? The government saying they're not going to change their offer.
The government really don't appear to have moved on this at all. They are still saying what they've been basically saying all along. It's a fair offer. It's a reasonable offer. The country cannot afford to give inflation-level pay rises. And, of course, the Royal College of Nursing are asking for 19%. Now, there's very few people that think that that is going to happen, frankly. Even Labour, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting have said, no, we wouldn't be able to give them 19%. Either. But the problem is, of course, that the Royal College of Nursing said earlier in the week to the government, please, Steve Barclay, Health Secretary, talk to us about pay and we will call off the strikes. Steve Barclay did meet with them, but he will discuss working conditions, training, etc., but not pay. And so the strikes have gone ahead, and more strikes next week. And people feel, I mean, obviously some people will be absolutely horrified that nurses that provide such essential care have gone out on strike. But others are sympathetic. People are pooping their horns on the picket lines, bringing them hot drinks, bringing them... It's very, very emotive, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think as well it's important to try to draw a distinction that I'll say again, I maybe have blurred unwillingly so anyway, earlier on, between the nurses and the unions. Yes, they're a bit intertwined, but there is a difference there. I was saying earlier on that I think maybe the unions wish they'd have negotiated harder and better earlier on. Now inflation has really ramped up the fact that potentially they feel as though the nurses can't really seem to get enough pay. We keep hearing about nurses going to food banks, etc. A lot of the members of the public in my inbox anyway, dead against this strike, potentially more on the side of patients than nurses themselves. As has been Wes Streeting, actually, a Labour MP frontbencher. They're a kind of big beast of the Labour Party at the moment. The Labour Party itself does seem relatively split on this and not particularly committing one way or the other.
It's very difficult for Labour because, of course, they have a lot of funding from the unions. They're historically completely tied with the unions, but they don't want to be seen to be saying, oh, all these strikes are absolutely fine, it's fine for the country to sort of grind to a standstill.
When they know they wouldn't pay them
so many strikes. They know they couldn't afford to pay that either, but they're treading a very, very delicate line. But I think that, as you say, the paramedics as well, who are due to strike, and the nurses, the railways, it's bad enough, the postal strikes, it's bad enough, it's all massively inconvenient, but these are different, aren't they? Because these are potentially threatening people's lives. I know the nurses have said critical care, but you would wonder, wouldn't you? It obviously is going to have an impact on people's health.
Absolutely. Things that might not be critical right now today could become critical tomorrow if they're not dealt with. Catherine, thank you very much, Catherine Forster. Look, loads of you have been getting in touch on this, and we're going to go to some GB viewers now. Just a quick one first in the inbox. Diana. Patrick, you never read my emails out either. Well, there you go, Diana. Just bang on the door and I will get to you. Nurses pay is close to 28k per annum when you increase things like London waiting allowance. This is Diana's view. However, I agree they deserve an increase, but I don't agree the pay is so bad they need to strike. And on that note, let's hear now from some of you who are joining me live on the telly, some of our very own GB News viewers. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. We've got John Reid from Kidderminster and Julie Ford from Bedfordshire. John, I'm just going to ask you now, as we do stare down the barrel of nurses on picket lines, whose side are you on, do you think? Are you on the side of the nurses? Are you on the side of the patients? Are you on the side of the government? Talk to me, John.
I'm absolutely on the side of the nurses and the public, and absolutely against the way the Tories are decimating the NHS. If you think about it, Patrick, for the entire life of this government, last 12 years is it now, they've said the NHS is safe in our hands, whilst at the same time gradually privatising bits of it. And I'm amazed that they don't just simply look at what they're spending. If you think what they spend on nurses that come in from agencies and compare that with the cost of putting this in, it's just a joke. I think they should go to the country and say, what does the country think? Let's have an election. Sort it out, because the nurses are absolutely right.
OK, all right, that's John's view there. I'll come back to you, John. Julie, your take, please. Julie from Bedfordshire.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, I do disagree with John a little bit there, to be honest with you. I absolutely understand why the nurses are striking. I get it. But is this really the government's problem to resolve? There's enough money goes into the NHS, but is the NHS divvying it up correctly? Surely there is enough money in the pot of the NHS. Maybe they could reduce the wages of some of the managers, the higher paid staff, to make sure that nurses are paid better so they can afford, like everybody else, along with the cost of living. It's hitting all of us. I understand why they're striking, but I don't think it's the government's role to resolve this problem.
Yeah, John, I'll lob it back your way, because if I'm looking at some facts and figures here, according to those facts and figures, there's been a 39% funding uplift in the NHS compared to 2010. We're expected to be paying around 180.2 billion this coming year. And I can't help but wonder, John, when I look at some job titles like the one I've got before me right now, which is a director for lived experience. Someone did point out that surely is the only kind of experience that you can have, but there we go. 110 grand a year, apparently. Actually, should the nurses be angrier at their management than they are at the government?
Yeah, we've got a family member that earns a really good salary on the National Health, and I've no idea what she does. She would tell me it's the most important job in the world, but, I've no idea. There must be loads
It's not being funny, John. Whilst I do appreciate you coming on national television and lobbing an anonymous family member under the bus, is that not a concern, John, that you don't know what they do?
I've got no idea what she does. None, only that she works for the NHS.
Yeah, but that's the problem, John, isn't it? If she's on a really good whack and you're coming out and supporting nurses, you know, shouldn't the nurses be shouting at your anonymous family member, John?
Yeah, they should be. I perhaps shouldn't shout at her, and it's nothing personal at all, because the comment really is aimed at anybody in the NHS that is in management and doing these jobs that you wonder whether they're really necessary. I've no idea. It might be the most important job in the hospital, or, you know, it might not. I don't know.
Grief. Julie, you're off the Christmas card list, John, I'll tell you that for sure. But, Julie, yeah, look, do you think that actually you're on the side of the fact that maybe this is a mismanagement of resources and taxpayers shouldn't be... Would you be willing to tolerate any pay rise for nurses? Apparently they were offered 4.3%.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there should be a pay rise. At the end of the day, they do a really hard job, and some of the situations that they deal with on a daily basis, I certainly wouldn't want to deal with. So yes, they are entitled to a pay increase, but 19% that they're asking for is way above what anybody should be entitled to at this particular time. But the offer that they were given, the 4.3 was it that they were given?
Roughly,
they should have taken that and then maybe look at next year asking for some more. But little by little, they should be looking at 19% is a huge leap.
OK, John, any moral issues for you? I mean, the thing is, I've obviously got relatives, right? And some of those are elderly. And whilst you would never think it's a good time for anyone that you love to get ill, now is an especially bad time for them to get ill. And John, I can only imagine the... well, bile, really, that I would be spouting on this particular show if something happened to my grandmother and the care that she received was substandard as a result of a nurses' strike. I mean, are you worried about getting ill at the minute and other people getting ill?
Not really. I do, however, think that when you listen to some of the nurses that I've heard today talking about only 2 nurses on duty where there should be a lot more, and therefore they can't do the basics because there's simply not enough staff there. And it's not just the nurses, is it? There's lots of sections of government-funded operations. Prison service is a good example, where the salaries are not commensurate with the risks and the work that goes into it.
Well, John, what would you pay?
Don't want to do it.
All right, mate. Now, I know there's a sliding scale, John, to what a nurse can earn. Roughly, from what I can gather, the entry level can be around 27 grand, and that can work its way up to about 50 or 60. You obviously think they should be paid more. Slap a number on it for me, John.
Yeah, I think they should be paid more when you consider they need a degree which they funded themselves to get in the job in the first place, and therefore got a loan to pay off.
Okay.
You know, I think I think, you know, if I was to aim a number at it at the moment, I think it might be another 10%, maybe.
You give them around another 10%. All right, Julie, are you concerned that we are, frankly, going to become the non-health service? I mean, the Labour Party don't seem particularly keen on actually solving this problem either. They're just crucially not in power, are they?
No, absolutely. And I do wonder whether sometimes these are stealth methods to us actually removing the NHS as a free service altogether and moving towards a health service that we pay for. I wonder if it's more strategic than we give them credit for.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Julie, I take it you won't be tooting your horn as you pass the nurses' picket line today?
I won't be tooting my horn, I'm afraid, Patrick, no.
John, you'll give them a toot, will you?
I'll be out there with them holding the placard.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, you might see your relative on the way in there. You can ask her what she does. John, thank you very much. John Reid from Kidderminster and Julie Ford from Bedfordshire. I really enjoyed that. Good stuff. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK. Well, look, you too can get yourself on the airwaves if indeed you so wish. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Leave a few details on there. I must say I am still reeling from the wonderful John in Kidderminster lobbing an anonymous family member under the bus there. She's well paid by the NHS. He's got no idea what she does. You love to see it. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, right here for a good while yet, you lucky, lucky people. And the second part of Harry and Meghan's Netflix docuseries dropped today, with the Sussexes even going so far to accuse the British press of contributing to their miscarriage. We'll discuss with Cameron Walker, our very own royal correspondent, in the Royal Reaction Room next. That, of course, is after this.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. That is a moody-looking promo, isn't it? Right, OK, let's get back to the reactions from the latest Harry and Meghan episodes that landed on Netflix earlier today. The royals must have been dreading what the Sussexes would reveal, and they were right to be a bit worried, as Harry did claim that Prince William screamed and shouted, leaving him terrified. Just going to remind you, that's the same Harry who served 2 tours in Afghanistan and was in the military, but there we go. The pair also did discuss Meghan's mental health struggle.
It's still been under the delusion that if it was in a tabloid, no one believed it. Like, it's a tabloid. And then we had a walkabout in Liverpool, and there was a group of women, and one of them said to me, "What you're doing to your father's not right." It was the first time that I went, oh my God, people actually believe this stuff. And then my entire center was rocked to its core. It was like, all of this will stop if I'm not here. And that was the scariest thing about it, is it was such clear thinking.
I remember her telling me that she had wanted to take her own life. And that really broke my heart.
Well, lots to talk about there, isn't there? Let's go live now to our Royal Reaction Room, where GB News' royal reporter Cameron Walker has been watching this docuseries. Cameron, look, undeniably, mental health is obviously not something that is, you know, a joking matter, a laughing matter. It is incredibly, incredibly serious, including the allegations there that she had thought, Meghan I'm talking about now, had thought about taking her own life. Let's deal with that first. Go on, what's your take on everything that we just heard there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty serious thing to say, Patrick, and it's very, it's a very serious thing to say, and obviously Meghan genuinely believes that's how she felt. I don't think we can question that that's how she felt. I think what she goes on to say is perhaps slightly more serious because it implies the press caused some of this difficulties that she was experiencing. So Meghan and Harry both say that due to the negative headlines, that's caused online trolls to then in turn threaten violence against Meghan in particular. Well, I'm joined by former royal correspondent Nicholas Owen, who joins me in GB News' Royal Reaction Room. Nick, first of all, Meghan's thoughts of suicidal thoughts, very serious thing to say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there won't be anybody, I hope, who won't feel enormous sympathy for her if she was going through some terrible trauma. She said she was, and her mother backs that up as well, very importantly, and mother wiping away tears as she talks about all of that. So that's an appalling situation. Whether you can blame it on a specific newspaper, I mean, it wasn't even as if she said, well, as a result of what the press were hounding us and then the media trolls were you mentioned media trolls, were after us. Not that, no, the Daily Mail, what done it? And that, I think, only invites another avalanche of criticism over their heads.
Indeed. Well, Harry mentions one particular story which happened just before this Sandringham summit when he was negotiating his way out as a senior working member of the royal family, involving allegations of bullying against bullying from Prince William against Harry and Meghan to bully them out of the royal family. At the time, a joint statement was released by Harry and William denying that story. But this is what Prince Harry has to say in this Netflix documentary about that particular statement.
A sign of public unity from the brothers, who issued a joint statement calling the report false, offensive, and potentially harmful.
I couldn't believe it. No one had asked me. No one had asked me permission to put my name to a statement like that. And I rang and I told her, and she burst into floods of tears, because within 4 hours they were happy to lie to protect my brother, and yet for 3 years they were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Well, Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace are not commenting on any of the allegations or claims made in this Netflix documentary series. Clearly, there are two sides to every story, but Patrick, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions, doesn't it?
Cameron Walker, it does, absolutely. Look, thank you very much, Cameron, from our Royal Reaction Room. They're bringing you the latest from the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Loads to come your way. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Coming up, the Bank of England has raised the base rate of interest yet again. It sparks fresh fears for households and businesses across the UK. Your emails are coming in thick and fast on this nurses' strike as well. We're getting stuck right into that and all the different elements of it, from picket lines with MPs, with members of the public, with politicians. We're going to be talking about all of that. And yes, your delivery nightmares, people. The worst delivery companies in the UK have been revealed. And I want to hear from you about some utter shockers, including one chap who had it left in a bin, only for that bin to be taken to a refuse centre. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. It's 4:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of two 12-hour walkouts over pay. Staff are providing some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment is disrupted. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the union's call for a 19% pay rise is unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Network rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. The RMT remains in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull on Sunday have been named by West Midlands Police. 8-year-old Finlay Butler, his 6-year-old brother Samuel, and their cousin, 11-year-old Thomas Stewart, were taken to hospital where they died on Monday. The families say they are devastated by the loss of the boys in such tragic circumstances. The 4th child, who reportedly tried to save the others, has been named as Jack Johnson, aged 10. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Loads to talk about today. Now, throughout the show, we have been discussing the release of the latest episodes of Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary. And just wanted to see if you recognise the voice of this particular titan of British broadcasting who featured on one of the episodes.
She thought that it would all just be tiaras and tea parties. She thought that it would all just be tiaras and tea parties.
Well, there you go. And international fame. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for it. It's just come to me. I couldn't move for paparazzi outside earlier, and Liam Halligan, who is in the studio
I'm in
now,
awe, mate. I'm not worthy to share the same studio.
No, he better not take his top off, because I signed his chest earlier. But anyway, the Bank of England has raised interest rates to a 14-year high, bringing the base rate up to 3.5%. This is the 9th time this year, and it will heavily impact homeowners and businesses across the UK in coming months. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, is with me in the studio right now with On the Money. Take it away, Liam.
At midday, Patrick, the Bank of England raised interest rates, as you say, for the 9th time this year. Let's have a look at the graphic. Interest rates were just 0.25% at the beginning of this year. And if we can see the graph there, they went up in steps 9 times to 3.5% today. That's a 0.5% increase. What does that mean? Well, if you've got a mortgage, for each £100,000 on your mortgage, then you will end up paying an extra £300 a year. That's £25 a month. There it is. And that's out your post-tax income, of course. So this is quite a big increase in mortgage payments. And particularly for those, Patrick, coming off a 3-year fix, a 5-year fix where interest rates have been really low, suddenly they're exposed to this new world of higher interest rates. So a lot of people are going to be feeling the pain. This is no laughing matter. I can say that we expected interest rates to go up even more today. They could have gone up by 0.75%. They just went up by 0.5%. So, but this is still quite tough.
Yeah, it'll still be hitting people. It's just not as bad as it could have been, really, I suppose, isn't it? Just in terms of homeowners or people looking to get on the property ladder as well, Liam, people now will just have to, will they suck it up? And I'm wondering whether or not a potential drop in house prices will counter this at all or not really.
Well, when you've got an increase in interest rates like we've had, a lot of people are saying, oh, they were 15% when I bought my house back in the early 80s, early 90s. Yeah, but houses are now a lot more expensive. So this generation of young people trying to get on the housing ladder, they've got to pay more as a share of their income for rent and for their mortgages, even though interest rates are lower, because the houses and the rent they're paying is so much more as a multiple of their income. A little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, though. Inflation is coming down. It's still high. It's still 5 times plus the Bank of England's target. That's why interest rates are still going up. But it came down to 10.7% during the year to November, down from 11.1% in October. That suggests that inflation has peaked, fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah.
And that means that interest rates might not have to go up that much more. But they've still gone up enough that mortgage payments are going to get tough enough for some people that they'll be forced to sell. When you get distressed sellers, that's when house prices start falling.
House prices is a thing that affects absolutely everybody, realistically, so whether or not you're either on the property ladder or looking to get on the property ladder. But another thing that's affecting people is strikes. And I know we talk a lot about the strikes here.
Rightly so.
If we were to give the various different unions exactly what they want, which let's just say is basically something in line with inflation. Let's just take the nurses thing at a 19%, right? If we were to give them all of that, what would that mean for our economy? Would it be disastrous?
Well, it depends how you financed it. If you financed it out of extra taxation, if you financed it out of the Bank of England creating more money, then that would lead to inflation. It just would. If you create more money, you get more inflation. If you put up taxes, then companies' costs go up. They have to pass those price rises on. On the other hand, Patrick, it's a balancing act, because if there are no wage rises in the economy at all, and of course, almost everyone's wages are less than inflation, so almost everyone across the economy is taking what we call a real terms post-inflation tax cut, then again, demand disappears and the economy contracts. And that's partly what we're seeing here. So it's a balancing act. What I would say, Patrick, is a lot of these strikes are in the public sector. Just a fifth of the workforce are in the public sector. They're a lot more unionised than the private sector. There's an awful lot of the 80% of the population that works in the private sector that are getting no wage rises at all. And we have to ask, even though there has been a lot of sympathy for nurses today, you've seen a lot of people honking their horns, you know, the guys, the RMT pickets outside the big train stations, London, Manchester and across the country. You've got to ask the question, as these strikes go on, and this is the calculation the government will be making and the union bosses, how long will the public's patience last? In any trade union dispute, it's the battle for hearts and minds that really matters. That determines how long the government can hold out or the unions can hold out, which determines the outcome.
Well, exactly, and how much is costing the various different people who are actually on the strike. Liam, thank you very, very much. Liam Hagen, our economics and business editor. Right, now, yes, moving on. This was a massive story for us yesterday, but it's part of a wider ongoing theme, isn't it? And it's the migrant crisis, the Channel small boats crisis, the asylum seeker crisis, whatever you want to call it, you get my drift. Authorities are continuing to search for 4 people believed to still be missing after their boat sank in the English Channel. The incident sadly left 4 people dead. Well, the tragedy has led to renewed calls for Britain to leave the European Convention of Human Rights, the ECHR, in order to curtail the Channel migrant crossings. Now, the ECHR stopped the deportation of migrants to Rwanda at the 11th hour earlier this year. In fact, there is more chance of Boris Becker being deported, apparently, than there is anyone who's managed to make it over the Channel, which I think crystallises this issue somewhat. Bye-bye, Boris. Anyway, so is it time for the UK to leave the ECHR? Joining me now is fan favourite Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, and Stephen Wolfe, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Now, Stephen, I will start with you. Why is it so important right now that we leave the ECHR? Why has the very tragic incident that happened in the Channel overnight yesterday, the early hours of yesterday morning, made it even more vital, in your view, that we get out of the ECHR?
It all comes down to how asylum claims are assessed and who gets the right to remain here as an asylum seeker. So I'll give you an example. This year, so far, we've had 28,000 asylum applications at initial decision, according to the government statistics, of which only 5,000 of those qualify under what's called the UN Refugee Convention. That means the remaining 23,000 are being allowed into the country based on an assessment either of humanitarian protection or our discretionary rules. And those discretionary rules are basically under the ECHR. So they include things such as, yes, they do. If you want to look at ASY0D1, Mr. McShane, and that's the rules I've been working on for the last 3 weeks, nearly 800 hours over the last 6 months of the assessments. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes down to these assessments. If we want to remove the people coming from, we remove the ECHR, that leaves at least 50% of people will not be acceptable under the current system.
OK, now, Dennis, I could see you shaking your head there. Look, the fact is that the possibility of drowning in the Channel is not enough of a deterrent to stop people coming across, as insane as that may sound. The reality is that as long as they know that they're not going to get deported once they're here, they are going to keep coming, ergo, the more people will die in the Channel. Dennis, I could see you shaking your head there at what Stephen was saying. Your views?
Very simply, the Council of Europe, I was a UK delegate to it, was set up by Winston Churchill. The International Refugees Convention was signed in 1951, and they're very long processes. You don't go to the Council of Europe or the European Court of Human Rights because you don't like how you've been treated when you arrive in Britain. You've got to go through about 3 or 4 or 5 or X years, going right up to the Supreme Court. It's all done in writing. Leaving the ECHR makes no difference. The worst drownings, if you remember, Patrick, have happened in the Mediterranean, horrible ones. All those countries they're trying to get to, like Italy or Greece or Spain, are all like us in the Council of Europe. The only country that's left the Council of Europe in recently is Russia, Vladimir Putin. Well, I'm making a point.
But let's be honest with you,
it's a very important point.
Just comparing us, I mean, we've not invaded Ukraine, have we? We have not got the abominable human rights record as Russia, just because that's a point of similarity. I mean, we had snow here yesterday. That doesn't make us like Russia, does it?
Well, I'm sorry. It will make no difference at all to a single application. Take the Albanians. The EU some time ago declared Albania a safe country. So France and Germany don't have to accept any and can send them back straight away. Because we won't work with anybody in Europe, we're in a different position. The ECHR is so irrelevant and making a great fuss about it. And don't knock the fact that Churchill will be turning in his grave that anybody in this country would say, let's line up with Russia against refugees.
I dare say Winston Churchill will be turning in his grave at the fact there was an Albanian flag draped around his plinth in Westminster. But Stephen Wolfe, I'll throw it back to you. Stephen, I can't help but wonder
why on earth our judges are so soft. You look at the Spanish judges, for example, they are sending people back. They're telling people that it's a safe country, Albania, whereas you look at the acceptance rates over here and they're sky high, actually. Do we need to leave the ECHR or do we just need to give our judges a bit of a wobble?
Well, the judges are able to use the ECHR, and this is where Dennis is completely out of his league of being able to understand the difference in law here. And clearly, the Refugee Convention enables people to claim under our immigration law. It's Section 1. There's a very clear definition about it. If you are fleeing if you are fleeing a country such as the Ukraine. But where the ECHR comes in is under the definition of humanitarian protection and our discretionary rules falling squarely within the ECHR, which includes, for example, Patrick, if you cannot get medical treatment in your own country, that enables you to live. So that is where the courts come in. And yes, people go through the courts and then the courts make a decision. Yes, under the ECHR will allow you to stay. If we remove ourselves from that, those categories are gone. It'll only go to those fleeing a country such as the Ukraine, not because you just feel like you're from Albania.
OK, look, I'm amazed that we're discussing something that's been in position for a very long time, the ECHR. We've got a former Labour Minister for Europe. We've also got a chap who's director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and both of you saying that each other is wrong. Dennis, why are you wrong?
Look, I'm not going to patronise Steve or insult him. That's two charges. It's far too important. Most of the people who died yesterday, it seems, were Iraqis and Afghanistanis fleeing the disaster we left behind, the disaster we caused when we invaded. They're not able-bodied Albanian men.
Who caused that out of interest, Dennis?
Well, we know perfectly well, don't we? George W. Bush and Tony Blair.
Right.
And we've stayed there, and we also intervened in Libya and Syria, so we've got millions of them coming here. You destroy a state, you turn it into a place nobody wants to live in. Now, to get back to the main point...
How did you feel about the war at the time, Dennis, former Labour Minister?
At the time, like with the majority of MPs in the country, I thought we should deal with Saddam. I now think that was a mistake. He's a brutal, horrible dictator, but frankly, what we've got is far, far, far worse. OK, ditto with David Cameron in Libya and Syria. Let's not get into any of that. But the point is that the ECHR is there that only can deal after the Supreme Court in Britain. You've got to go through all the different proceedings and prove beyond a shadow of doubt that ECR rules are being violated. And then they might rule. But as we know, other European countries are sending people back to Albania as a safe country, and we should be doing the same. But more importantly, we should have enough officials. As an MP, in my case, it was people from Pakistan and Iraq, and it took 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You did a famous story a month ago about the guy from Ethiopia who arrived when Theresa May was Home Secretary, and he's still not being dealt with. That is government incompetence, and that's what we need to sort out, and stop getting hysterical about destroying one of Churchill's finest creations.
All right, OK. Stephen, I'll throw it over to you. One of the big arguments that is levelled at, people like me, I dare say you as well, who want to see what's going on in the channel stopped, frankly, is, well, there are no safe and legal routes here, and until we have them, people are going to have to make this horrible journey across the channel. Your views on the safe and legal routes issue?
Well, there are no safe and legal routes to go into France, no safe and legal routes to go into Germany, no safe and legal routes to go into Portugal or Greece, and all those countries fall within the same rules that we had whilst we were a member of the European Union, and those rules remain in those countries afterwards. So it is irrespective of whether we are in safe routes, it doesn't really affect us that much. The idea of safe and legal routes is being used by people to have an open door immigration policy into the UK. Because if we did do so, the only time it's been practiced is when Merkel opened the doors of safe and legal routes into her country, and 2.5 million people have gone in since that particular claim. We'd have over 1 million if we did the same.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. It's great stuff. I could talk to you about it all day, but we've got to move on. We've got to keep it moving, people. High tempo here. It is Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, and Stephen Wolfe, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. There we go. Thank you very much, chaps. Right, OK. Now, I've just about got time to squeeze in a few more of your delivery disasters, OK? And I've been calling for this because, in light of the Royal Mail strikes, there was a rather timely list published earlier on from which was basically about which delivery companies are the worst. And I was asking you to get in touch And it's been fantastic. One day, Patrick, this is from Bill, one day I had a parcel containing an item for an elderly lady. Getting no reply, I spotted her refuse bin at the back door. To save her the problem of rearranging delivery, I decided to leave it in the bin and put a note through the door. Unfortunately, she was off on holiday, and the next day a neighbour put out her bin and emptied it. And that is from someone who's tasked at delivering your packages. So we've had someone whose job it is to deliver parcels email in to tell me about a disaster that they've had themselves. I think this is fantastic. Bill, I won't reveal where you're from, Bill, just in case you get the sack, which, to be honest with you, it sounds like maybe you should. There we go. Right, I once ordered 2 coats from John Lewis delivered by Royal Mail. I came home to find a note to say, in wheelie bin. But it was bin day. There's a theme here. Maybe this was Bill. It was in wheelie bin. But it was bin day, and so they were on the pavement. And here's another one. I won't read out the name on this. My daughter was shocked after hearing the front door open and a delivery driver in our downstairs hallway. He'd let himself in to drop the parcel inside the door, but amazingly, the picture that he took of the front door was a jar and the package inside. So there we go. Thank you very much, everybody. Keep those delivery nightmares coming in. The news agenda can get a little bit heavy, can't it? It can all get a little bit miserable at the moment with strikes and what's been going on in the channel and all of that stuff. So actually, sometimes it's quite nice to have a little bit of light relief. And I do enjoy having you on the show very, very much. So please keep all that coming in. GBViews at GBNews.uk for all of your views. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads more to come in the next hour. We'll be returning to Harry and Meghan stuff. We'll be returning to the nurses' strikes as well. I have got MPs queuing up to come on this show in the next hour. Anyway, before that, it's your weather. There you go.
I'm Alex Deacon, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Milder weather is on the way, but it's going to be a frosty Friday with some snow likely across Scotland. Could be heavy in places as well and may cause some disruption, particularly on Friday morning's rush hour through the central belt. This is the culprit. Doesn't look much, does it? A fairly weak area of low pressure, but these weather fronts moving in will be bringing some wet weather, hitting that cold air. Could provide some heavy snow later tonight. Still a few wintry showers over northern Scotland and for eastern England, where things could be quite icy, and some mist and fog patches reforming this evening, which could be quite dense. But for most, it's clear, and it is very cold, especially in the south. Actually, it won't be quite as cold across the northwest compared to recent nights, because here that wet weather is moving in. Some heavy snow over the Highlands, and then through the morning that could well slip through the central belt of Scotland, especially for that morning rush hour. We could see a few centimetres of snow for a time before it then starts to turn back to rain as we go into the afternoon. But the potential for some disruption as that wintry weather hits Scotland during tomorrow. A few showers for Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales dry and sunny once the fog has cleared, but still cold, struggling to get much above freezing. And quickly, on Friday evening, temperatures drop back below freezing. Bear that in mind if you're heading out. With showers across parts of the north, could be icy on Friday night and into Saturday morning. At this stage, the showers will mostly be of rain at low levels, but some snow is still possible, certainly over the hills of northern England during Saturday, and more snow showers coming in across the Highlands of Scotland. A few showers getting into parts of Wales as well. Again, most of these will be rain at low levels. Much of the south and the east will be dry and bright on Saturday. And look at this, 4 or 5 degrees. Most of us haven't seen that for a good few days. It's going to turn milder still on Sunday. This area of low pressure is moving in. It's bringing milder air, but it's also bringing strong winds and, for a time, on Sunday, some heavy snow.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, welcome back everybody. It's just gone 5 o'clock. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, and a jam-packed final hour coming your way. Downing Street says there are no plans to look again at the pay deal for nurses. They're staging the biggest strike in the history of the NHS. A lot to unpack here. Very strong views on all sides. We'll have the latest on that strike chaos, which is, well, let's be honest, damaging patients' health and safety, and the lightly anticipated final 3 parts of Harry and Meghan's docu-series have dropped on Netflix. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have unleashed a whole new set of allegations about the royal family and Megxit. I am in that documentary, by the way. I don't like to go on about it. I don't want the fame. I don't want all of the paparazzi out there. I am available for bar mitzvahs and weddings. Just speak to my agent. Anyway, our royal reporter Cameron Walker will join us with all the details. And is free speech under threat at our universities? The higher education watchdog certainly thinks so. And they've warned unis to stop using equality laws as an excuse to curtail free speech. Here we go. Have we reached peak woke, where equality laws are actually being used for some kind of, well, dare I say it, pretty draconian agenda? We'll speak to a university professor who themselves were persecuted for their views on gender. Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Loads of you getting in touch so far when it comes to the nurses' strike. Should they have taken that 4.3% pay offer and stayed in work? Are you concerned, or will you be tooting your horn as you pass a nurses' picket line? Oh, and also I want your views on whether or not Harry and Meghan now owe me royalties. Pay up, Winge and Gins. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Get in touch. I'll see you after the headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour walkouts over pay. Staff are providing some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment is disrupted. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the union's call for a 19% pay rise is unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Well, ICU nurse Kelly Hopkins says they're striking not just for pay, but for their patients.
Patients aren't safe, patients aren't getting the care. At the moment, there's 2 nurses on a ward that cannot deliver that care. We're going into hospital. I came into nursing to look after my patients, to hold their hands, to look after them, to wash them, to brush their teeth when they're unable to do that. And I can't do that at the moment because there's not enough staff on the ward.
Network Rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. The RMT remains in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. Travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, told us now that TSSA's reached a settlement, it may well lead to the RMT offer being accepted.
Interestingly, Andrew Haynes, the chief executive of Network Rail, has been saying that the outliers in this dispute are now the RMT union, the main rail union, that it is a good offer relative to what everything else is happening in the country, and that people should accept it. It's not going to get any better. But meanwhile, of course, the dispute with the 14 train operators goes on, and anybody who's planning to catch a train later on this evening, well, do check in advance.
Meanwhile, ground baggage handlers at Heathrow Airport have suspended planned strike action after receiving an improved pay offer. More than 400 staff members had been set to begin a 72-hour walkout tomorrow morning. The Unite union says it will now ballot its members, and other planned industrial action remains in place pending the outcome. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull have been named by West Midlands Police. 8-year-old Finlay Butler, his 6-year-old brother Samuel and their cousin, 11-year-old Thomas Stewart, were taken to hospital where they died on Monday. The 4th child, who reportedly tried to save the others, has been named as Jack Johnson, aged 10. The families say they are devastated by the loss of the boys in such tragic circumstances. At least 19 children have now died in the UK from strep A since September. The UK Health Security Agency says 16 children have died in England and 3 other deaths have been recorded in Belfast and Wales. It's understood health officials believe the number of infections has not yet peaked. The government has introduced serious shortage protocols for 3 penicillin medicines so pharmacists can supply alternative forms to those prescribed. Authorities are continuing their search for 4 migrants believed to be missing after a boat partially deflated in the English Channel. 4 people died when a boat with 47 on board capsized off the Kent coast yesterday morning. The leader of Kent County Council says 12 of those rescued were unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who are now in the care of authorities. British officials and lifeboat services, as well as the French Navy, were all involved in the rescue operation. The Bank of England has raised its base rate from 3% to 3.5%. It's the highest level in 14 years and the 9th consecutive hike. The Chancellor says he acknowledges times are tough, but that the government's working with the Bank of England to reduce inflation. 3-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker has been deported from the UK after being freed from jail today. The 55-year-old German tennis star served just 8 months of a 2.5-year sentence for bankruptcy offences. He was convicted in April of hiding £2.5 million worth of assets and loans to avoid paying his debts. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's over to Patrick.
OK, I've got a massive final hour of this show for you. As you can see on your screens there, we're going in on the nurses' strike. Some updates for you. We'll bring you those very, very shortly. Nurses walking off the job across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. MPs' reaction, patients' reaction, public reaction, picket line reaction. I'm also going to be talking about the old Harry and Meghan trailer as well, which I think we can all agree I play a starring role in. I woke up this morning to a flurry of messages on my phone. I mean, the world fell out of my you-know-what for a second until I realised, actually, I emerged quite well from the whole thing. Why? Because I'm right. I am right to say that. I think they're wrong to do that. We're also going to be talking about the Channel migrant crisis with an interesting angle from a Tory MP on this, who says that in his area, he believes that migrants are taking advantage of our system and indeed complaining about the Ofsted rating at local schools. So we're going to be talking about all of that, GBViews at gbnews.uk, but we'll start with that top story. Nurses walking off the job today in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, staging their biggest ever strike in the history of the NHS. In Scotland, where it was being fated, wasn't it? You see, they're not striking in Scotland, the SNP can do a deal with them. Well, because in Scotland, members of the GMB union have become the first to reject a new pay deal offered by the Scottish Government for NHS staff. So, there you go. But Downing Street say there are no plans, despite the strike action, no plans to improve that pay deal for nurses. A little bit on that pay deal, 4.3% reportedly is what they were offered. That is on top of around 3% earlier this year, 4% the year before that. The Royal College of Nursing continues its campaign for a 19% increase to salaries. I think we were all suspecting there would be a little bit of wiggle room there, maybe a little bit of meat in the middle, but alas, that doesn't seem to be the case from either side, frankly, from either side. The strike action in the NHS coincides with ongoing industrial action by rail workers. Shortly, Transport Minister Hugh Merriman will be meeting with RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch to try to facilitate some form of agreement. Really interesting stuff on that, though, because you've got the TSSA union, I know it's hard to keep up, isn't it? The TSSA union accepting a pay deal. It remains to be seen whether or not ASLEF are happy about the whole thing. Mick Lynch potentially becoming increasingly more isolated, an old case of the divide and rule potentially when it comes to the unions. But we're focusing on nurses, and a lot of you have been getting in touch, and a lot of mixed views when it comes to nursing. People saying that the idea that they're understaffed and underpaid is nothing new, that it is in fact the cost of inflation that's exacerbated it. But a lot of people getting in touch to say that now they are seeing the nurses actually on picket lines. They will not be tooting their horns for them. People actually quite angry. Important, I think, to maybe direct some of that anger towards the unions and not the nurses themselves. I fell into that trap myself earlier. I have no desire to repeat it. GB News' London reporter Alice Porter has been outside St Thomas's Hospital in London today. Let's just see what she brought for us, OK?
Well, a quarter of trusts in England are striking today over concerns over nurses' pay and safety in hospitals. And there's been a picket line here outside St Thomas's Hospital in London since 6:30 this morning. One of those protesting is Matt Smith, who is a nurse who joins me now. Matt, I mean, this beeping going past that we've been having for a number of hours now, it does suggest that a lot of people are supportive of what you're trying to achieve. I mean, what have you heard from people coming up to you?
Just the overwhelming support. You have people cycling past, clapping, walking past. People are bringing out food, drinks for us. And the overwhelming majority of people are very supportive of what we're doing here today.
And what has brought you to the street to be striking today?
It's just concerns about the NHS, the way the NHS is being dismantled at the moment. We've got huge vacancies within the NHS. There's around 48,000 nurse vacancies in the UK alone, not including all the other professions that work for the NHS as well. And this is having a huge impact on how the NHS operates and patient safety within the NHS as well.
And does it become something of a sort of chicken and egg that because people are leaving the profession, it makes it harder for the people who are still there, and it makes it more tempting in terms of leaving?
Well, definitely, yeah. The less people there are, they have to do more work to just get the stuff done, and this is why you're seeing that the waiting lists are currently growing. You know, it is already big after the pandemic, and it's just getting bigger and bigger because there's not the staff to be able to bring down the waiting lists at the moment.
And does that mean that a lot of trusts, in terms of where you work, do you end up being quite reliant on agency staff in many ways, which can in turn be very expensive?
Yeah, I know a lot of trusts are using quite a lot of agency staff, and it's just very expensive. The agencies charge a very high fee for the nurses to work there, and if the basic pay of nurses in the NHS was increased, then there'd be more people who'd be willing to work for the NHS and take the NHS salary rather than having to work for an agency at a higher cost. It's just not a cost-effective situation.
is a 19% pay rise, is that realistic? I mean, a lot of people watching this may support you and support what you're trying to achieve, but may think that 19% is just simply too high.
Well, it's not really a pay rise, though. We're not asking for a pay rise. We were asking for pay restoration. You know, we've had, over the last 10 years, we've had 20% effective pay cut. So all we're asking for is to be back to where we were, where we should be. So it's not even a pay rise. It's still 1% below where we should be at. So, and I know some people may think it's a bit too much, but when nurses and health professionals are unable to feed their families, they're having to go to food banks. These are people who are trained with degrees and master's degrees, having to use a food bank because they can't afford to feed their family because of this poor pay that's within the NHS.
Well, Matt, thank you very much for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. I think that gives a sense there of what some of the reasons why people have come out to strike today. I think the real concern really is that we're expecting more strike action next week, and so I think the pressure will really be on the government and the RCN to try and resolve this very difficult issue.
Yes, Alice Porter there, our reporter from a nurses' picket line. I must say, if I was inside St Thomas's Hospital feeling desperately unwell and all I could hear is the banging of drums and whistles and shouting and tooting of horns outside, I think I'd be inclined to double up on the old morphine, but there we go. Joining me now is Khalid Mahmood, Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr. Thank you very much, Khalid. Do you support the nurses' strikes?
I absolutely support the nurses' strike. I've been in hospital. I've had a kidney transplant in 24. And when I was there at that time, the ward sister was on her 14th hour of working, where she had a lower number of nurses that she could rely on to work, and she had to try and check me out that evening, and I ended up at 11 o'clock by leaving that hospital.
OK, all right. Why doesn't Keir Starmer support the nurses' strike then? You must want him to.
Well, he does support the strike. What he's saying to the government, and so is Wes Treating, what he's saying is, get off your backside, go and speak to them. They've come to you this week, and Mr. Barclay wasn't prepared to speak to them. So get up, sort this issue out, speak to the nurses, and don't just rely on an outdated formula that's been put in for the nurses' pay.
With respect, Khalid, that's not quite true, is it? Keir Starmer really does not publicly support nurses' strikes, does he? And also, Wes Treating appears to be more on the side of patients than unions.
No, he's not. All of them believe that the nurses are the fundamental part of the National Health Service.
Yeah, and but they don't support the strikes, though, do they?
That right amount of support in order to support their families. The pay that they deserve should be to them. And let's the Secretary of State for Health sit down with them and work out a figure that's reasonable for them to go back. They're not prepared to do that. That's what the problem is.
What figure is that then, Khalid?
Well, the figure we want to get to the table to negotiate. And that's the issue. You set a figure out, thinking that's the best figure you want, and trying to meet with the current needs, which is what they're saying at the moment. But they will come in because these are the people who are there not just for the money. They do it because the hard work and everything else, because they believe in the profession that they're in. It's a caring profession, and they want to continue to do that.
Yeah, but Khalid, you've got to put a number on it, my good man, because Keir Starmer himself has said that 19% is unaffordable. The government apparently has offered them around 4.3%. So you must have conversations with the Labour leader. This is one of the biggest crises facing the country at the moment, nurses' strike. Surely he's got to have a number for us.
Patrick, it's not for us to decide a number. It's up to the nurses, unions to sit down with the Secretary of State for Health and come to an agreement on a figure which they can work on. That's what we want to do. That's what Wes Treating wants to do. That's what Sir Keir Starmer wants to do. They want the government to sit down and talk to them. Unfortunately, we're not in government at the moment. If we were, we'd be doing that.
So you'd talk? You'd sit down and you'd just talk?
Of course.
All
no,
right.
you talk to settle. You talk to settle. What we're based on now at the moment, the pay commission that's looking at are figures based on February 2022 and before that. You know, there's been a huge economic change in the country since that, and we're going to try and address that.
Yeah, there is a slight issue, I suppose, potentially for the Labour Party. The NHS bracketed as a bit of a sacred cow for Labour, with good reason, absolutely fair enough. But when you look at the real terms funding uplift that the Conservatives have pumped into the NHS since 2010, that's 39%. We've got an earmarked budget of £180.2 billion for this coming year. That is £50 billion more than 2010/2011. Is it a bit of a sticky wicket for the Labour Party? Because you might have to accept, realistically, that it needs some reform and that we can't just keep pumping money into this so that managers can get 100 and odd grand a year.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is what West Street has been saying this week, is doing another report tomorrow, where it's particularly saying, look, let's reform the old internal economy, which was set up by Margaret Thatcher. Let's move on from that. Let's look at the new practices that we can bring in. Let's look at the new way of working and not have that economic reform. Let's take away, for the last 12 years, the huge amount of money that we pay to the agencies and invest in those nurses that can be trained and put back into the service. So that would help. So, of course, we want to look at new practices. Of course, we want to look at new structures. And that's exactly what West Street is asking for.
Will you be on a picket line, Khaled?
If I get there tomorrow, yes, I will. I will support the nurses. Yes, I will.
You will, even if Keir Starmer says that he doesn't think people should be going on picket lines in the Labour Party?
I think what Sir Keir said is in relation to the front bench. I'm not on the front bench, so I have that privilege and I will exercise that if I can.
It's only a matter of time, Khaled. Surely they keep talking the way you're talking, you'll be on the front bench in no time. Surely someone would have thought that. But yes, look, thank you very, very much, Khaled. Look, it's been great to have you on the show. We do appreciate you coming on, navigating your way through the fact that, let's be honest, the Labour Party is in a little bit of a sticky position at the minute when it comes to the unions and the nurses. But there we go. Khaled Mahmood, their Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Bar. Interesting stuff. Right, OK, well, look, the Ministry of Defence has confirmed that more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel to the UK yesterday. The same day, 4 people died making the dangerous journey. So clearly, obviously, no deterrent there, no one being put off by that tragic loss of life. I'm going to speak to a Tory MP about that very, very shortly. And there is a lot to get stuck into because, yes, of course, tragedy in the Channel. How do we stop all of this happening? But also, how do we stop something taking place when we get here? This particular MP does fear as though our system is being absolutely abused, including the fact that, as he puts it, some migrants in hotels in his area are criticising the school's Ofsted ratings, for goodness sake. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll be back shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Yeah, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Another big one for us. This another bit of breaking. Within the last few moments, the Ministry of Defence has confirmed more than 400 migrants crossed the Channel to the UK yesterday. On the same day, 4 people died after their small boat capsized, making that dangerous journey. It takes the total number of people who've made that crossing so far this year to 45,223. It's believed that 4 more people are still missing. So, look, very, very unfortunately, let's be honest, 8 people are believed to have died now in the Channel as a result of that, because those 4 people, unfortunately, will no longer be alive if they are still missing, given the amount of time they're in the freezing waters. Of course, the search for them, however, does continue. Now, it came just the day after Rishi Sunak stood in Parliament, ominously not Suella Braverman, potentially him trying to take full control and therefore full credit if indeed it does work, unveiling his new plan. Some elements of that plan, though, I think left people scratching their heads, like, oh, OK, we're going to have border officers at an airport in Albania. Fine, well, I'm not being funny, but it doesn't take the brains of Britain to work out that that won't be much of a deterrent to the people coming from Albania. They'll either use a different airport or just not listen to them. Also, on top of that as well, the use of holiday camps and disused university halls and various different army barracks as well in order to house these people. Well, shortly, fingers crossed, we're going to be speaking to Jonathan Gullis in a little bit anyway, a Tory MP. And I read with some interest his comments. Now, whilst, of course, we have absolute 100% complete and utter sympathy for the tragedy that took place in the Channel and the sad loss of life from there, it does not change the fact, clearly, given the breaking news on those figures, that 401 people crossed on that day as well, the loss of life in the Channel, which these people will have known about, does not act as any more of a deterrent for these people coming over here. So what does? And the threat of deportation, one would argue, does. Also, smashing those human trafficking gangs. And as far as I can tell anyway, I think we should be sending the SAS in abroad. But Jonathan Gullis said with some interest, I read this in the Telegraph, that migrants housed in hotels in his area are criticising the local schools' Ofsted rating. He seems to be of the opinion that they are taking advantage of our system and that it would be good to enact the Rwanda migrant plan. I am fascinated by the fact that it appears that we've managed to deport Boris Becker quicker than we've deported any Albanian drug lords. But there we go. Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, joins me now. Jonathan, I believe, is he there? No? OK, we might not be able to go to Jonathan just yet, but that's all right. Look, to be honest with you, it's not the end of the world, because I know this is an issue that gets a lot of you going anyway, and the inbox is actually full. And Philip has just echoed a view that I raised just a matter of seconds ago. We need British troops to join operation with the French army to wipe out these trafficking gangs. And yes, indeed, we do, although some would argue there's a lazy joke to be had there about the quality of the French army. But I won't make it. I won't make that joke. I am better than that. But I can't help but feel as though that realistically, as long as people know that when they come here, that they can get decent 4-star hotel treatment, that holiday camps could be used for them, that disused army barracks could be used for them, and that this country, in a sense, will roll out the red carpet for them, then they are going to keep coming. And some people go, well, the deterrent should be enough for what tragedies could happen in the Channel. Well, unfortunately, it isn't a deterrent enough. And I don't want to keep having to sit in this chair right now and keep reading out news stories about people drowning in the Channel unless we have a serious deterrent, and that deterrent is deportation, and unless we manage to actually cut the head off the snake when it comes to these vile human trafficking gangs. Without those two things taking place, it doesn't matter how many chocolate fire guards you have at Tirana Airport. It doesn't matter how many holiday camps you roll out. It doesn't matter how many lawyers you manage to get involved or how many flights at all. It's going to keep happening. With me now is Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. Yes, good stuff, Jonathan. If at first you don't succeed, keep trying. Right, Jonathan, now I did read with some interesting article that is about you and about some of your comments in the Telegraph. You seem to be saying that people are taking advantage of our system, and you've even had cases of some of these migrants criticising the local schools' Ofsted ratings. Talk to me.
Well, we won't be shocked, Patrick, to know that this is just further evidence that these are economic migrants, not people fleeing war. I was told by council officials that at one of the hotels in Stoke-on-Trent, there's someone currently studying their PhD at Queen Mary's University, and when they were told where their local child was going to go to school, complained about that school's Ofsted rating and was asking if we could send their child to the local private school instead. All off the Stoke-on-Trent and Great British taxpayer dime. It's just an absolute shambles and a joke, and we need to sort this out, because if we don't, then the Conservative Party will see the consequences of that at the ballot box.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I'm sure we all really regarded it as another epic tragedy in the Channel there. 4 people sadly dying when their boat capsized, 4 more missing, so I think we can assume, rightly so, that number now is probably up to 8, right? So has that changed the game for you when it comes to this? Has it, I don't know, has it made you more sympathetic in any way, do you think?
It's made me more determined, Patrick, than ever that we need to get answers to this question. We need to stop people trying to get into boats to come across here illegally, to stop choosing to put money into the hand of people smuggling gangs. Because if we don't break this model that the smuggling gangs and the human traffickers are using to make vast amounts of money, if we stop the successful arrival of small boats, or even boats being able to launch over from France to the UK, if we make it very clear by passing laws, something that Lee Anderson and I have been calling for a long time, along with others, that if you arrive here illegally, you can't claim asylum. If we can deliver on that, then we break apart the model that says to people it's worth trying and taking a chance and risking your life. And that will therefore result in people not having to lose their lives in the Channel and stop traffickers trading in human misery. So no, it hasn't stopped the determination for wanting to stop this, because otherwise more and more people, and the Home Office is projecting 80,000 next year if we don't get on top of this.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And the fact is, it's a sad fact, but the possibility of your boat capsizing in the Channel is not enough, and everything that comes with that, by the way, death being the main factor there, is not enough to deter people from coming, as long as they know that if they do manage to get over here, then they actually will be able to stay. So I get your point there about the fact that there needs to be deportation, genuine deportation, flights taking off or whatever, in order to stop people. But I can't help but wonder as well, none of this really properly stops until we crush these human trafficking gangs. We keep hearing, Jonathan, about we've got the best special forces in the world, the SAS, the envy of the world. Or should we not be using them more to go and find out where some of these human traffickers live, even if that is, you know, in caves, in mountains, in the Middle East somewhere, and just get them slotted?
I do have some optimism in the plans that Rishi Sunak announced about putting boots on the ground in France, and obviously having our British border force and police forces working with the French in order to use the latest tactics, the latest intelligence, and to make sure that communication is improved, having people in Albania as well, in Tehran, again, to build that knowledge as well about what's going on in that country and how we can assist, as well as obviously the National Crime Agency, actually getting jurisdiction to go much further, increasing the funding, just really focus and deliver. I have confidence that those are sensible solutions, but again, no option should be left off the table. And whatever we need to do, we should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that your particular area there, Stoke-on-Trent North, has been significantly affected by the use of migrant hotels, and the cost of the local taxpayer, the cost for your local council, the cost of the taxpayer in general is vast. Local resources, public services, we've spoken about that rather a lot. I am concerned, and I want your views on this, that instead of just using holiday camps or disused military barracks or disused student halls, you know, actually what we're being told here is that we've run out of hotels now, we're going to use these as well. And I think anyone would realise that doesn't save the taxpayer money, it costs them more.
Well, look, Patrick, I'm pleased that the Prime Minister wants to move away from using hotels, and that will obviously bring a saving with it. But like you, I want to know the detail behind that. Where are these 10,000 places? How long are they occupied for? You know, what happens if one of those providers wants to pull out of the contract, etc.? Can we guarantee that no hotels will be used? These are questions we need to answer. And when it comes to, very quickly, sorry, Patrick,
that's right,
processing, I'm pleased to speed up processing. But when the Home Office is accepting 7 to 8 in every 10 applicants, the British public will not stomach 70 to 80% of 44,000 people being kept here.
No, and sorry, look, really seriously, quickly, just a few words actually on this now, very, very quickly. If Rishi Sunak does not meet the target that he's set himself about clearing this asylum backlog by basically this time next year, do you think he's got to go?
I think that the Prime Minister should stay as the Prime Minister all the way to the next general election, but I think that we'll suffer the consequences for it at the ballot box in the next election.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Jonathan Gullis there, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. Right, sorry, better late than never when it comes to the news. Is free speech under threat at our universities? Yes, is the short answer to that. I tell you what, I am very late, so I'm going to get shouted at. Here's your headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. It's 5:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Tens of thousands of nurses are taking part in the biggest strike in NHS history. Picket lines have been set up in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in the first of 2 12-hour walkouts over pay. Staff are providing some urgent care, but routine surgery and other planned treatment is disrupted. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the union's call for a 19% pay rise is unaffordable.
We also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Network rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept a pay offer. It affects around 2,500 members of the TSSA. The RMT remained in a separate dispute with Network Rail after its members rejected an offer earlier this week. The 4 boys who died after falling into a frozen lake in Solihull on Sunday have been named by West Midlands Police. 8-year-old Finlay Butler, his 6-year-old brother Samuel and their cousin, 11-year-old Thomas Stewart, were taken to hospital where they died on Monday. The 4th child, who reportedly tried to save the others, has been named as Jack Johnson, aged 10. The families say they are devastated by the loss of the boys in such tragic circumstances. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2186 and €1.1493. The price of gold is £1,460 and 85 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,426 points.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. That is a moody promo, isn't it? It's time to turn our attention back now to the latest drop of the Harry and Meghan docu-series on Netflix. And yes, I know. People now watching this on TV, listening to me on the radio, you will recognise my voice from being included in the Harry and Meghan Netflix docu-series. I, forever now, will be able to tell my grandchildren that I was in one of the most influential Netflix docu-series ever made, and I said I wasn't going to watch any of it, but as you all know, my ego is so fragile that I now will be watching every single second of their latest offering. But the Sussexes have opened up about their dramatic escape out of the UK. They fled the UK. It's amazing, isn't it? Because there are loads of people who want to come here. But anyway, Prince Harry says that it was his decision, not Meghan's, to leave after plans for half-in, half-out royal life were rejected during a family meeting in Sandringham, the showdown at Sandringham. Harry has also criticised the Mail on Sunday, arguing that his wife suffered a miscarriage as a result of their press coverage. Let's just have a little look at this moment.
I believe my wife suffered a miscarriage because of what the Mail did. That I watched the whole thing. Now, do we absolutely know that the miscarriage was caused by that? Of course we don't. But bearing in mind the stress that caused, the lack of sleep, and the timing of the pregnancy, how many weeks in she was, I can say from what I saw, that miscarriage was created by what they were trying to do to her.
I mean, that is incredibly strong stuff. And here to talk about it is royal commentator Jenny Bond. Thank you very much, Jenny. What do you make of that allegation, which is, well, let's be honest, that the Mail on Sunday caused Meghan's miscarriage?
Well, it's obviously extremely tough to hear, and I have huge sympathy with both Harry and Meghan over the miscarriage, and I'm sure it is true. I'm not an expert, a medical expert. I think stress can certainly lead to miscarriages. I mean, he himself, he's quite fair in that. He says, I can't say categorically, absolutely, that's what's caused it, but in my view, it is. It's a terrible thing to hear.
It is indeed a terrible thing to hear. Now, that is one of the most incendiary allegations there, and it is a terrible issue. They also go on to talk about Meghan's mental health as well, and the fact that she had suicidal thoughts and that was maybe brought on a bit by the press, well, a lot by the press. But there is also another little clip that I want to play for you, Jenny, and get a bit of reaction on that. And this is in relation to Harry and his relationship with William, and this is where it gets even spicier. So let's have a look and a listen.
The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much-loved family members. What am I looking at? Wow. H just got a text. The H just got a text from his brother.
OK, so that is Harry showing Meghan a text message from William, and that is just in the wake of that famous Recollections May Vary statement by the royal family following when Whinge and Ginge cried into Oprah's bosom, right? So do we have any idea what that message actually said?
No, and I think therein lies the problem. I think we needed more transparency. We've had 6 hours of them telling their side of the story, and that's absolutely fine, making all sorts of accusations and generalised allegations with very little evidence. Some of the evidence they did put up was in the form of headlines flashed up on the screen, and many of those headlines, which were about the terrible British media, the appalling evil tabloids in the UK, actually were from the National Enquirer in the United States, from the Daily Beast, from New Idea in Australia. So I needed more proof, more evidence of their allegations.
But also, they actually played a clip of me saying that Meghan thought it would all be tea parties and tiaras underneath a news headline by the National Enquirer, which is nothing I've ever read or had anything to do with or anything like that. So kind of playing a bit fast and loose there. And also, I would say as well, I'm expecting my cheque for the royalties in the post. I would imagine that I am due some kind of financial recompense here from Harry and Meghan. But there we go. I await with bated breath to hear from them. But I'm sorry, but that all seemed to me, Jenny, a little bit like the kind of behaviour that you might get in an all-girls school boarding room, where it's like, oh, look at this text message, oh, look at that. Is it not just a little bit pants?
I'm sorry, I missed your cameo. I do apologise. I thought I'd watch with great attention every detail. I mean, you know, it's drama, isn't it? It's good drama to have that. But I think, you know, we needed not only to know what did that text say, if not verbatim, you know, that he's prepared to say everything else that William said, that William shouted at him, screamed at him at the Sandringham summit. So, OK, Harry, what was in that text? Yeah. And who are the people who've been briefing against you? Who is this mystery woman of the palace who apparently, unbelievably, told Meghan that she was like some kind of foreign organism getting into the fish, the monarchy fish that was happily swimming, and then this strange organism came in that wasn't like her, like them, and looked different. OK, if you're going to say that, say who, and then we can go to that person and say, did you say that? OK, so now am I right in saying that all of the episodes of Harry and Meghan's docudrama on Netflix have been released? That's it now. There's no more. Is that right from Netflix? Yeah. You are well. You're saying that's what. Well, this is series 1 anyway. Oh, I see. OK, I see what you mean. But this is my point, which is that, well, we've had all of this now, and you and I are still asking and trying to answer some of the same questions we were asking before, like, well, who do they really mean? What do they really mean? What was really said? What really went on? And surely now the patience of the international community has been evaporated. Tell us or shut up and go away. Well, yes, I rather think that. And at the end, you know, Meghan talks about how all she ever wanted was peace and harmony and to re-establish relations, family relations, friendship relations. Well, this is not a way to do it. And there's a wonderful montage at the end of them skipping happily through the sand and being deliriously happy. But ironically, it then ends. There's 2 statements put up. Another dispute about who said what to whom to do with the communication sector. It's complicated, but it ended with yet another rift. Oh, grief. OK, so you actually think that there might be a series 2 to this ongoing nightmare? Well, I mean, we do know that the book is coming out very shortly, so that's going to be another sort of series, but series of allegations, I suppose. But I noted it did say series 1, so who knows? Patrick, you can't wait. You can't wait, you know. No, I mean, look, I am, as anyone knows, incredibly fragile and fickle, and I was vowing that I was not going to watch a single second of this thing, apart from the clips that GB News, frankly, make me sit through here. But now I've found out that I'm in it. Of course, I will be glued to it, and I'm just keen to see that they're using my name for clout. But there we go. Thank you very much, Jenny. Jenny Bond there, who is, of course, the royal commentator. Just whizzing with you the Harry and Meghan latest. Yes, it is really me, people. I couldn't move for paparazzi earlier this morning, I must say. I've been signing people, various different parts of people's bodies throughout the course of the day as well. The attention on me since my appearance in Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary has just been too much to bear. But if you do want to hire me for bar mitzvahs, weddings, or indeed any birthday parties, you can just contact my agent.
OK? Right, now, moving on. The Higher Education Watchdog has issued a stark warning to universities to stop using equality laws to restrict free speech on campus. So basically, the old equality lot, you know, the lovey, lefty, liberal lot, well, are they actually using equality laws, hiding behind things like, oh, you're a massive racist, in order to stop people from just speaking freely, in order to stifle debate, some would say, in order to behave like little dictators? The chief executive of the Office for Students says that curtailing free speech by focusing too much on their equality duties could well be a problem. And the watchdog warned that promoting a particular protected characteristic to the detriment of others may even be unlawful. Look, it sounds a lot more complicated than it is, this. I want to speak to someone with lived experience, and that is why we've got Professor Rosa Friedman, human rights lawyer and Professor of Law and Conflict at the University of Reading, who has experienced, apparently, the suppression of free speech on campus herself. I'm going to throw it over to you now. What suppression of free speech did you experience on campus, and what do you think the ongoing issues are, please?
I think the ongoing issues are fairly clear. We want to be able to have robust, evidence-based discussion about difficult issues. That's our job. We're academics. We're going to be teaching our students, and we want to be able to talk about issues that are difficult, that are contentious, and that may make some people uncomfortable so that we can address societal issues.
Well, the reason, just forgive me just to interject here quickly, but the reason why they're difficult issues, and it's something that, you know, especially on shows like this, we try not to shy away from too much, but the reason why they're difficult issues is because often they're the issues that need sorting. They're the most pressing issues, and sometimes that makes them controversial. And are you concerned that those are the very issues that are being stifled?
Listen, I think it's controversial that some people might say that Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite. He may or may not have been. We could talk about that. We could talk about Brexit and whether or not there are people on campus that didn't want to say that they voted for or against Brexit. We could talk about vaccines. We could talk about any controversial issue. The absolute fundamental to academic freedom, to universities, is that we can talk about these things in a respectful and robust and evidence-based way. Yeah. What we saw yesterday, where a whole bunch of students and some staff shut down a filming of an absolutely lawful film in Edinburgh, was absolutely appalling. We should be able to screen films, and if we don't agree with them, let's talk about them afterwards. Let's not just shut them down. Let's not just have students stand in rooms and stop these films being screened at all.
Look, I've seen it firsthand, actually. I've seen things happen, like, for example, Jacob Rees-Mogg was due to talk at university and students come in and kick off, and it just kind of makes it impossible, even if he tries to engage with them and things like that. And look, you know, I'm not going to stand here and just, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg is not a hill I'm willing to die on, right? But I would die on the hill that defends his right to actually come and do a talk and engage in a robust debate. I think we're absolutely knackered as a country if we can't do that. But who is stopping this stuff? Because one of my concerns is that now so many students have kind of drunk the Kool-Aid that there is this climate of fear. It's not necessarily the law, it's more society. I don't know, your view.
I don't know. I think actually it goes both ways. I don't want to see the BNP or the EDL or Jacob Rees-Mogg being platformed in a university and being told this is a great person to talk to, but I want to challenge their views. I want to be able to say to them, I disagree with you, and here is the evidence base for why I disagree with you. And that's the same on the far left or the far right or in centrist places or anywhere else. I want to be able to discuss vaccines. I've been vaccinated many times, but I want to be able to hear the discussions and the robust evidence for why I shouldn't be vaccinated. If we can't talk about issues, what's the point of universities as a place of knowledge production and as a place of robust freedom of speech?
Yes,
so
indeed.
Here we are in a place where lots of young people may disagree with our points of view, but the way to disagree with it is robust discussion, not shutting things down and not setting fire to stink bombs to stop things going ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on, and I don't need to know what your politics are at all, and the nation doesn't need to know what politics are whatsoever, but the point is that it shouldn't really matter, because we should be able to have discussions about things, and I think there should be a point of agreement for everyone on every single element of the political spectrum, that at least we can have the chat. And as far as I'm concerned, people fought and died for that right, OK? And I think it's a desecration of their memory as well, the idea that we can't do it. But look, thank you very, very much. I've enjoyed this. I think it's the first time I've spoken to you on this show. I really hope it's not the last, actually. That is, of course, Professor Rosa Freeman, human rights lawyer and Professor of Law and Conflict at the University of Reading. Right, now, look, I wanted to finish with a little bit of you, OK, because it has been a bit heavy over the course of this show. We've had a lot of strikes, a lot of nurses' strikes. We've had, obviously, the incidents going on in the Channel. We've had a variety of heavy things, a little bit Meghan and Harry, but that's not so heavy, is it? But I wanted to ask your delivery nightmares. Why? Because in light of the Royal Mail strikes, OK, consumer group Which, we all know Which, they did a survey to find out the best and, crucially, the worst delivery companies. And I was asking you, throughout the course of this show, you wonderful people, to get in touch and tell me your delivery nightmares. And you have not disappointed. You never do. You never let me down. Thank you very much. There is an anonymous one. Hello, Patrick. I caught the delivery driver having a pee at the side of my house, and he has the altercation filmed on the Ring doorbell. The Ring doorbell, the introduction of the Ring doorbell, is the utter peril of any delivery person whatsoever. Loads of you have been getting in touch with this. The worst delivery company is without doubt DHL, and that actually is confirmed by consumer group Which, and we have a right to reply there. This is from Andrew. He says that one day he got a notification to say that his parcel had been delivered, and when he came home, it was on the roof. Andrew, I mean, I've got more questions there than I think we have time to actually answer, but surely it takes more effort to put it on the roof than it does anything else. And just a couple more here, actually, very, very quickly. There's one from a chap that I read out earlier called Bill. Now, Bill claims to be a member of a delivery company, right? And Bill said that he once was delivering a parcel to an elderly lady. He thought he was doing her a favour because she wasn't in by putting it in the neighbour's bin, but didn't realise that it was bin day. And so, you know, poor old Doreen from number 42, Bill, has gone without whatever the living heck it was he was supposed to deliver her. And there we go. Well, look, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a fantastic show for audience participation, I must say. Always a pleasure. gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you do decide you want to get in touch, make sure you leave us your details, because increasingly I want to get more of you actually on the airwaves. So there we go. Anyway, Jubes & Co is up next with the wonderful Michelle Dewberry. She is on the airwaves. What's coming up, Michelle?
Hello, Patrick. Well, the sensible viewers of Jubes & Co said that they don't want Meghan and Harry tonight, so that's off the agenda. They obviously haven't heard that you've had a bit of a featuring role in there.
Starring role.
Yeah, starring role. Yeah, one of the best. Anyway, so we're at H&M Free Zone tonight instead. Everything's in a mess right now in this country. The boss of Iceland, the freezer shop, not the country, says that he wouldn't mind being Prime Minister of this country one day. So I'm pondering, do you think that we need more business people in government? Is that the answer to some of the country's woes? I also want to look at the rise in interest rates. Is a housing crash around the corner? Some say yes, it is, and some say that it would be a good thing for that to happen. Open justice, cameras in courtroom, good thing or not. And smoking in New Zealand, they're banning it. If you were born after 2008, you can't buy cigarettes forever. Some people say in the UK should follow suit, should they? And by the way, I'm saying smoking, not smoking.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you did there. Yeah, just, Michelle, I love the optics now that we're going to end up having at one day like a 48-year-old New Zealand man in a car park asking a 49-year-old New Zealand man to nip in and buy him a deck of fags. I mean, it's fantastic.
Oh, you take me back to my youth there. We're outside of off-licence.
Yeah, exactly. And bottle of white lightning as well while you're at it, please. Anyway, right, Michelle, thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry there with Jubes & Co. What a rip-roaring show that's going to be coming your way. Thank you very much, everybody. I've been Patrick Christys, and I'll be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll see you there.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Milder weather is on the way, but it's going to be a frosty Friday with some snow likely across Scotland. Could be heavy in places as well and may cause some disruption, particularly on Friday morning's rush hour through the central belt. This is the culprit. Doesn't look much, does it? A fairly weak area of low pressure, but these weather fronts moving in will be bringing some wet weather, hitting that cold air. Could provide some heavy snow later tonight. Still a few wintry showers over northern Scotland and for eastern England, where things could be quite icy, and some mist and fog patches reforming this evening, which could be quite dense. But for most, it's clear, and it is very cold, especially in the south. Actually, it won't be quite as cold across the northwest compared to recent nights, because here that wet weather is moving in. Some heavy snow over the Highlands, and then through the morning that could well slip through the central belt of Scotland, especially for that morning rush hour. We could see a few centimetres of snow for a time before it then starts to turn back to rain as we go into the afternoon. But the potential for some disruption as that wintry weather hits Scotland during tomorrow. A few showers for Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales dry and sunny once the fog has cleared, but still cold, struggling to get much above freezing. And quickly, on Friday evening, temperatures drop back below freezing. Bear that in mind if you're heading out. With showers across parts of the north, could be icy on Friday night and into Saturday morning. At this stage, the showers will mostly be of rain at low levels, but some snow is still possible, certainly over the hills of northern England during Saturday, and more snow showers coming in across the highlands of Scotland. A few showers getting into parts of Wales as well. Again, most of these will be rain at low levels. Much of the south and the east will be dry and bright on Saturday. Look at this, 4 or 5 degrees. Most of us haven't seen that for a good few days. It's going to turn milder still on Sunday. This area of low pressure is moving in. It's bringing milder air, but it's also bringing strong winds and, for a time, on Sunday, some heavy snow.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out